Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm MaXXXine fucking Manx. Oh, it's Patrick Garrett, actually. Everybody thought Mia Goth was on the show tonight. No, it's me.
No, I had to snort that off my microphone real quick.
My bump is starting to fall into the little pop screen here.
Yes, tonight, Patrick, we are here to talk about the final chapter, the highly anticipated final chapter in the X trilogy with MaXXXine.
MaXXXine, Damon, of course, released in July of 2024, starring, of course, Mia Goth as MaXXXine Minx. Oh my God, who else we got here? Elizabeth Debicki as Elizabeth Bender, Giancarlo Esposito as Teddy Knight Esquire, Moses Sumney as Leon, Kevin Bacon as John Labatt, and Michelle Moynihan as Detective Williams, Bobby Cannavale as Detective Torres. Oh my gosh. Everything is happening, written and directed by Ty West. Damon, it's finally arrived, right? One of the more anticipated movies of the last 2 years, the last 3 years. MaXXXine is finally at our doorstep.
Can I ask right out of the gate, and I'm not saying this is a complaint. I'm just saying when this started to get announced, when we reviewed X a couple years ago, we loved it. That was I think that was top 5 favorite film for me that year, and I know it was close for you. Great film. And we've talked about on the podcast when we reviewed Pearl, we kind of gave it a very lukewarm review. And then afterwards, watching it a couple times, we both agreed we liked it better on a second or third viewing. MaXXXine, when this got announced and they were doing it, of course, we all got excited. Okay, cool. They're doing the third chapter. They're going to conclude the saga, and they're going to tell us what happens to MaXXXine after that Texas porn star massacre, which is great. But then they started announcing the cast. And listen, I mean, they're all talented. I'm a huge fan of Michelle Monaghan. Bobby Cannavale is great. Obviously, Giancarlo Esposito is incredible. You know, this cast is stacked. And maybe I'm alone in this. But was there any small part of you when they started announcing the cast that you're kind of like, man, this is weird? Because while I do know that, Brittany Snow is a name, I think she did like Pitch Perfect, I think was what she was best known for.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And you got to remember, while Jenna Ortega was in X, she was not the Jenna Ortega of now. She was not the Wednesday massive giant star Jenna Ortega. She was like basically at the beginning of Scream Jenna Ortega, like when she was still very much not a household name. Mia Goth was not a household name. And, of course, Kid Cudi is Kid Cudi, but as an actor, he's Scott Mescudi, and people didn't really know him. And then, there was, Martin Henderson is a genre actor, again, not a big name. You go back to Pearl. Mia Goth, of course, once again, incredible actor. And then you add in Superman, who is now Superman, but back then no one knew who he was. Actually, when he got Superman, everyone's like, oh, he was in Pearl. That's literally the only thing anyone knew him from. Yeah. And then again, just a bunch of no names. When they started announcing all the A-list actors for this one, I got a little worried because I'm like, this seems to go against the spirit of these films. Now, to be fair, as I mentioned in the intro, Ty West never wrote this to be a trilogy. He wrote X to be X. That's all he ever wrote it as. And then again, because of circumstances, the pandemic, he's like, why don't we take advantage of this and make 2 movies? And then at that point, he's like, well, why not do 3? So I understand this is different because Pearl and X were both filmed in New Zealand back to back during the pandemic. I understand all that. But was I alone in thinking like it's a little weird? Like when an indie film finds success and they make a sequel and suddenly the studio throws money at them and there's more actors in there. Am I wrong in thinking like I got a little worried about that? Am I reading too much into it?
I don't think you are, because and there's something, it's more spoilery than anything, so I won't really get into it, but I think MaXXXine has a lot to do with Ty West's own filmmaking trajectory. I really do. I think it's a lot to do with it, because just like you said, he made X to make X. He got with A24 and they were like, cool, we like this idea. We love Mia Goth. If she's a real indie darling, like if you knew her, you knew her. And let's be honest, X kind of blew her up. X and Pearl back to back like that, like blew her up. Then she had Infinity Pool. She's like having a moment. Eventually she will play a grandma villain in that Blade movie that may come out in 30 years. like she's having a serious moment. So I think I think the hype was real. Like there was this crazy wave. Like Ty West sat down with Martin Scorsese, one of mine and yours favorite directors of all time, and talked about Pearl with him, like on the DGA podcast. Martin Scorsese's walking around, people saying, "Hey, have you seen this movie Pearl? It kept me up all night." Like he's being kind of ushered into Hollywood. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So I think that wave that happened with him and X Pearl and Mia Goth, that whole big wave that happened in a very short amount of time, got a lot of people in the industry buzzing about Mia Goth and Ty West. And Ty West has worked with other great actors in other movies plenty of times. He's had Greta Gerwig was in House of the Devil. Like he's worked with plenty of great actors. So I think it was more of a matter of like, we all want to be here to say we were part of MaXXXine. MaXXXine got tons of hype. And I think that's what I was gleaning when I was seeing trailers with all these names in them. Like Halsey's in this movie. We'll talk about her a little bit more too. It would just seem like, whoa, like all of a sudden everybody's jumping on the train, on the Ty West train, when you and I have known about Ty West for years. I mean, I think I first remember reading about Ty West when I was a production assistant back in Los Angeles working on commercials. I'm sitting there in the production office, like when we got time to kill, reading like industry magazines, and they're talking about this new hot director, Ty West, and how he's this uncompromising genreist, who's doing things by his own style. But it's been a slow climb for him, and all of a sudden now he's like here, and MaXXXine felt like his big coming out party.
Yeah, and listen, I want to be clear about this. Like, we've talked about this on the show before, that a lot of times when a horror movie is able to cast like really, really talented actors, you do get a bit of a leg up, because while we almost have to judge on a curve a little bit. When you're a no-name movie with a no-name budget and you got no-name actors in there, while you do find a gem in the rough, a diamond in the rough, you do have to understand that, like, when you're dealing with, first-time thespian, so to speak, you're not going to get Meryl Streep and, Leonardo DiCaprio kind of performances. But then again, when you get a higher budget, bigger budget horror movie and you can cast Oscar-worthy talent, it's going to have a bit of a leg up, at least in that part. Now, the story and the script can still suck, and we've had plenty of movies where we've said, boy, oh boy, was that wasted talent. But it just worried me a little bit, because I think what made Pearl and X so unique, beyond the storytelling, and of course a huge part of that is Mia Goth and her performance and her execution in both of those films, but because we just really paid attention to the movie and the story. It wasn't about, and forgive my language saying this, Patrick, but you know what I'm talking about. It wasn't about star fucking. It wasn't about, ooh, I know that guy. Where do I know that guy? And this guy, and that girl, and that girl, and that girl. Again, maybe I'm wrong, because I know X did have named actors. It did, but they weren't big stars. Now, I'm not saying that Bobby Cannavale and Michelle Monaghan and some of the actors in this movie are just the biggest A-list celebrities ever, but it's just like they all jam-packed in this one. And I got a little worried, saying, man, I wonder if it's being a little disingenuous to the story. Are we making it bigger for the sake of jam-packing all these A-list celebrities in here? Like, did we create characters? I don't know. I'm not saying that Ty West changed his script and said, I got to add in Teddy Knight Esquire so I can cast Giancarlo Esposito in this movie. I don't know that he did that. I really don't. This could have been the script he wrote, and this was the whole plan the entire time, and this is just who got cast in those roles. I don't know that for certain. But that was my first concern when the casting came out. I was like, wow, this is a lot of like really big name talent joining this cast versus, what we saw in X and Pearl. That being said, I also have to talk about the danger of a third film like this when there's so much hype around it. I've said for weeks, this is one of my most anticipated films of the year. I loved X, and I've grown to love Pearl. There's a danger in going into a theater with a certain level of expectation of what you're going to get. I always tell this story. Now, this is not a trilogy. This is just a different movie. I always tell this story. I'm pretty sure I've told it in the podcast before, but it's been a while, so let me just retell something for maybe people who are new here. Years and years and years ago, a much younger Damon was a huge comic book fan. Still a very huge comic book fan. I have the freaking Infinity Gauntlet tattooed on my hand. But there was a little movie coming out called Daredevil. starring Ben Affleck. Now, I was a massive Spider-Man and Daredevil fan. They were my two favorite comic book heroes growing up. Spider-Man I'd seen all over the place in terms of like live action, but I had never seen a live action Daredevil outside of the really terrible one that starred on the Spider-Man TV series back in the 80s before I was even old enough to know what was going on. But then Daredevil the movie was coming out. And, you know, they cast Michael Clark Duncan, rest in peace. Everyone's like, oh, that's Kingpin? It's kind of weird. And then Jennifer Garner, and they changed the way Colin Farrell looked at his bullseye, but all the fans were still like, all right, let's give it a chance. Then it came out. And boy, was I excited going into that theater. I was like, this is Daredevil, man. I'm probably getting the Man Without Fear. And I walked out of that movie theater going, wow, that sucked ass. And I think not because it wasn't good, because it wasn't a good movie, but I think my expectations were so high and the letdown was so big that it was just, I think the most recent example of that, people are like, oh my God, he's talking about it again, is Halloween Ends. Now the movie sucked like a Dyson. Let me be clear about that. That movie was god awful. But you set the stage with a third film in a Halloween trilogy, expecting to give us this climactic showdown, and what we actually got was the Corey show. So it's dangerous to go into these movies with a certain level of expectation. And I think, listen, I got to be careful because we got another one next week with Longlegs coming out, a movie that you and I have tried to avoid every single thing about, but just knowing it's Osgood Perkins, Micah Monroe, and Nicolas Cage, you don't say anything else. We would be fucking jazzed out of our minds.
Yeah.
But am I right in thinking like that expectation is a dangerous thing to have?
I've said it before. And by the way, it's 90% of the reason there is social media outrage when a movie or TV show does something. Because the expectations are way over here. And we've been doing it with MaXXXine. We've been doing it for years. I mean, quite literally, we've been doing it for years. When we saw at the end of Pearl that we were getting a MaXXXine movie, and you know, with the great You Are My Obsession from that one band. Oh shit, why can't I think of their name right now? That's gonna kill me if we don't get it right.
Animotion's
Obsession comes on, and this helicopter is tracking around the Hollywood Hills, and you see the Hollywood sign, but instead it says MaXXXine's coming soon. Everyone's like, oh shit. I mean, it was basically comic book level hype for a horror movie because we'd fallen in love with Mia Goth and this character and these stories. And so we had this hype coming. They didn't even have a movie shot. They were just like, it's coming. It'll be here. So we've had a long run up to this. Same with Longlegs. And Damon knows exactly the kind of gymnastics I'm going through to avoid anything Longlegs related. I saw one trailer by accident. And even today, I'm texting, as I'm watching the movie, I'm texting Damon going, I'm keeping my head down because the Longlegs trailer is playing right now and I refuse to watch it. I don't want any expectations. I know that I'm going to see Alien Romulus the first day it comes out. I know that about myself because I'm an alien nut. I am absorbing the trailer way too fucking much. I already explained to Damon the whole movie. I have the whole movie figured out already. This is the problem with expectations. It gets you built up and hyped up. And the worst part of that is you start filling in the gaps. You start deciding what the movie is supposed to be. That will screw you every time because these filmmakers have taken years to get this thing going and get this thing moving. I don't think Ty West is the type of person who was like, I have to change my script because Giancarlo Esposito wants to be in the script. I think he had that character laid out and then it was just like, cool, we can actually get bigger names and I'll take them because they want to work with me. That's cool. I think that's every filmmaker's dream is to just get bigger and cooler names, not because you don't like the indies, but just because like, hey, it's an opportunity to work with a really great actor and it builds hype and the studio loves that. Cool. Give me a bunch of names. We'll all benefit from it. But it causes that level of expectation in the fans where you just go, oh shit, I can't wait. I literally said this out loud to my brother. I said, there's no way this movie's going to be bad. Why the fuck would I say that? Knowing how the hundreds of movies that I watch, but my expectations really got to a fever pitch with this movie and they've been pushing it for a while. Great trailers, by the way, A-plus trailers. Even though I love to avoid trailers if I can, you couldn't if you tried. And not only that, they're cool to watch. They're actually well-made trailers that get you hyped up for this movie. But that is exactly what's happening. I'm getting super hyped up. And then the movie comes out. And then there's a verdict. And we're going to get to that in a minute, Damon. So I'm with you. Expectations are a dangerous thing, and it's about to get even more dangerous because next week, the most elusive movie on my calendar, Longlegs, is going to come out, and I'm finally going to see something. Because I've refused to look at anything. I looked at one trailer by accident, and I never forgave myself. I don't want to know anything about Longlegs. And all the reviews are coming out, and I have to fucking scroll past them all. It's fucking shit. Because I don't want to have expectations about that movie. And I'm actually trying to keep my expectations for that movie low. And that might relate a little bit to what happened when I went and saw MaXXXine. But before we get to that, Damon, I wanted to ask you a question because we are kind of on the topic of Ty West. He's having panels with Martin Scorsese. Now he's got the big name actors. He's gotten the attention of Hollywood in a big way. Is Ty West breaking out? Is this Ty West's breakout moment?
I mean, I think you have to say yes. I think I would argue that his breakout moment was Pearl, because when you have Martin Scorsese voluntarily saying this movie disturbed me and kept me from sleeping, that's a big deal. It's Martin Scorsese, for God's sake. So yeah, I would say that immediately made him an A-list level director. Now, I just pulled up his filmography, and I've gone back. Now, looking at his filmography, I have seen House of the Devil, I have seen The Innkeepers, I have seen The Sacrament, I have seen X, Pearl, and MaXXXine. I have not seen a couple of his other movies. The Roost, Trigger Man, I've not seen that. I've not seen Cabin Fever 2. I didn't even know he was involved in that. And In a Valley of Violence, which somehow I've never really heard of, and that's a Western. It's not even a horror film. So like when you look at his filmography, very genre outside of that one film. I don't know what The Roost or Trigger Man is, but again, most of his films have been horror. But I would say Pearl is the one that really broke him out and got him in the indie. While X was great and it was a surprise hit and everyone loved it, I think more people were taken back by Mia Goth than Ty West in that film. Now, I think Pearl was a combo because Mia Goth stole the show, and there's people like us, even us, when we gave it a kind of a meh review, we even said like she should be nominated for Oscars. I gave her my best actor for that year, because I thought she stole the show. But that was more of a combo role. That was Ty West and Mia Goth together. So I think that's kind of where he broke out. And now this is almost, I know this sounds horrible to say this, be like, wow, you really didn't like this movie. The best I could compare it to, and this is a weird comparison to make, it's when Kevin Smith, everyone loved him with Clerks. Everyone said Clerks was genius. It was this brilliant indie film, and that was right around the time Tarantino started and Robert Rodriguez. There's like these indie filmmakers that all blew up at one time. And then a studio came in, Universal came in and said, hey, Kevin Smith, here's $5 million. Go make your next movie. And then Mallrats bombed hard at the box office. Now, revisionist history would tell you Mallrats is fucking brilliant. I loved it.
I saw it in the theater and loved it.
But it bombed hard when it came out, and everyone went the other direction. Like, well, we gave Kevin Smith a chance, and it sucked. And then he did Chasing Amy, did Dog, we did some other stuff and kind of rebounded his career. But in that moment, he was the hottest director in the world. Mallrats came out, and he went to the bottom of the well again. I feel like that's where Ty West is with this movie, where everyone loved him after Pearl. Even you and I, when we said, like, at the time, we were not super fans of that movie. We didn't say it was bad. We're just kind of like, it felt unnecessary. Now, again, to be fair, we went back and revised it and said we actually really liked that movie. Just, it took a couple viewings. I think that was his Clerks. That was his Reservoir Dogs. That was his, what's the Robert Rodriguez before Desperado?
El Mariachi, yeah.
El Mariachi, that's his. Even though he's like 9 films in, that's the one that got him noticed. I feel like MaXXXine is his Pulp Fiction. It's his Mallrats. It's his Desperado, where everyone's now watching. No one's saying, hey, man, you got a great up-and-coming career. Who are you? People know him now. So I feel like this is a little beyond the breakout star kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because, yeah, I mean, I think I didn't know anyone who wasn't excited to see MaXXXine, truth be told. If they were like halfway into movies, MaXXXine was like the biggest anticipated summer movie of the year. Now, as of this recording, we have no idea what the box office looks like. But if this is a smash, if like this comes in at like number 2 or even number 3, honestly, because it's a busy, crowded, it's like 4th of July kind of weekend. If it crests number 2, or even if by some miracle hits number 1, it's going to change Ty West's life like completely. Like if he has a number 1 movie on 4th of July weekend, that's a horror movie. That's a total genre bend. I mean, what's next for him? I don't know. Kind of whatever the fuck he wants, I think is the point. It will literally be the open door and be like, what do you want to do next? And as a genreist, I've compared him in the past to Quentin Tarantino. I think he is like that. I think he's like, no, I like to do things an exact way, an exacting way. And he's never compromised that. Like, that's why I don't like House of the Devil or House of the Devil, because it's uncompromisingly a late 70s, early 80s like cult slasher type movie where like the whole middle of it drags like a big dirty sack of old clothes. Like I know he did that on purpose. He's like, no, you don't understand. The middle hour of your movie, nothing is supposed to happen. People are supposed to talk. They're supposed to vamp. They're supposed to fuck around. One little thing will happen and it moves you into the third act. He did it exactingly. MaXXXine, I don't want to give anything away, is the least Ty West movie I've ever seen. X, I think, is a dyed-in-the-wool slasher. Pearl, I think, is a crazy. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty out there, but it's very much a Technicolor horror movie. Like he was like, I want to make a movie from the Technicolor. I want to make a horror movie from the Technicolor era, and he did it, and it's fucking brilliant. It actually is. Yeah, I wish we had seen it a few times before we reviewed it because it's pretty brilliant. But MaXXXine, from the trailer, would tell you this is a standard 80s like thriller slasher. Here we go. But it's not. It's a lot of things. It's the first Ty West movie I've seen that is not exacting the way his other movies are. For good or for bad, well, you're going to have to wait for spoilers for that.
I'll say this. I agree with you on that note. And I will say, to Ty West credit, because I did read a couple of interviews with him doing research to get ready for tonight. And he had said very specifically when he decided to do the X trilogy, which again, it was not intended to be that way. When he wrote X, sent it to A24, they said, good, go make a movie. And again, just like I said in the intro, he got to New Zealand. It was during the pandemic, and he's like, we're in such a rare situation right now where we're making movies and nobody else is in the world. That's why they went to New Zealand, because New Zealand had such strict rules, and you had to quarantine for 2 weeks. It was during that 2-week quarantine where he's like, I got an idea for another film. And so him and Mia Goth kind of got together and palled together and worked together. And then he reached out to A24. He says, listen, I could make another movie for half the cost because I already got the sets built. So let me make another one. And they said, sure, go ahead. So again, they had no idea at that point how successful X was going to be. Now it worked out really well for them. So you got to remember, this was not a filmmaker saying, I've mapped out a trilogy or I've mapped out a 6-part story, which, by the way, let's be honest, that backfires a lot of times when filmmakers are saying, I know Avatar, it's going to be 19 stories, it's going to be 19 films. I love James Cameron, but let's slow down on the whole, like, it's going to be like 22 parts or whatever the hell you're doing to Avatar. So, to his credit, he said in the interviews leading up to this film that, much like you said, X was a dyed-in-the-wool slasher set in 1979. It was a little bit 80s slasher, a little bit Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we loved it. Pearl, as you said, was Wizard of Oz as a horror film in a way. You know, it was Dorothy on the farm without the fucking acid trip going to Oz. And this one, he said, I wanted to make a different film for MaXXXine. I didn't want it to just be another X. I didn't want it to be another Pearl. And as you said, for better or worse, it is. And while I do have issues with MaXXXine, I do appreciate his artistic sensibility to stick to his guns and say, I just didn't want to make three of the same film. I didn't want to make three parts of the same film. I didn't want to make two parts of the same film. For better or worse, Ty West created a trilogy out of thin air because it wasn't supposed to be a trilogy. He created three very distinct parts of the trilogy. All three have an interconnected story. Now, do you need all three parts to tell the story? Not necessarily. Truth be told, Pearl is its own movie. You don't even really need Pearl to get to X. It's just fun to see how Pearl became Pearl and when you meet her in X. But ultimately, he did make a three-headed story, and every piece of the story is different from the other. You can't look at MaXXXine and say, wow, that's the guy who made X. Or you can't look at X and say, wow, that's the guy who made Pearl. So I appreciate that kind of individuality that he stuck to his guns. And what I will say about MaXXXine, here's where I go back to my expectation conversation, Patrick. I went in after seeing the trailers, which were fantastic, by the way. I mentioned, you mentioned it as well. The trailers were fantastic for this movie. I had this idea in my head of an 80s slasher set on a Hollywood movie set, almost like a Hollywood movie studio set, because we knew that this was MaXXXine's big break. That's what she was going to do. The story, to lay it out in a very simplistic plot without ruining anything, no spoilers here. The story is we pick up in 1985, 6 years after the porn star massacre in Texas, and MaXXXine has been living in Los Angeles for several years. She's still working as an adult film star. She's working at a strip club, but she is desperately trying to get into mainstream movies. And she just gets into an audition at the beginning of this movie for a horror film that is a mainstream big studio picture horror film. And she's auditioning for this role. She thinks it'll be a life-changing role for her. But at the same time that happens, her past starts to come back to haunt her, which you can see in the trailers. Somebody out there knows that she was involved in that porn star massacre back in 1979. So the past, very much Magnolia. We may be through with the past, but the past ain't through with us. And so that's where our story picks up. And then there's also this other side story of the Night Stalker, which was a real killer in the 1980s. That is killing people in Los Angeles. So it's almost like this interlaced story of a serial killer haunting Los Angeles, and Maxine Minx is trying to make it big as a star, yet she's being stalked by someone who knows something about her past. I went in thinking this was going to be, Scarface meets Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. It's going to be 80s opulence, but also that great 80s slasher flair. While there are certainly elements of that, it is a much different film.
It's a much different film. And I will say, just some basic things, because I think our audience is probably like, hey, get to the fucking movie already. I will say you get what is a great, great design for the 1980s. It really feels like a 1980s film. I didn't doubt Ty West was going to be able to achieve that. You get the 1980s aesthetic. You get some great kills, some great gore, some great mystery. It's the story that I want to talk about desperately. But you've basically told everything that everyone already knows and best they can before any spoilers happen. So, Damon, is it time for spoilers, or do you got something else for me?
I think that's pretty much where I'll go. I will say this to anyone listening, and I know we've been dancing around a lot of stuff because people probably at this point don't even know whether we like the movie or not. It sounds
that's
very
intentional.
Much like we're cautious. Yeah, we're kind of cautious in what we're saying. I'll say this. I saw an early screening of MaXXXine on Wednesday, and then I saw another screening on Friday as we're getting ready to record this. So I've seen it twice. You've seen it once. That was very intentional on my part, because I've said many times in the show, much like the Pearl phenomenon, where I feel like I know a movie better when I see it twice, especially movies that we're going to kind of give an in-depth review for. I'm actually seeing Longlegs twice next week for that very reason, because I just feel like I soak a movie in better two times versus once. And I had already bought preview tickets for MaXXXine. My girlfriend said, I want to see it too. It's like, sure, let's just go see it twice. No big deal. my opinion on Wednesday when I left the theater, I was a little disappointed. I wouldn't say I was a little disappointed. I was a lot disappointed. I walked out saying, man, that was not the movie I thought it was going to be. I was Pearl. I was very lukewarm. I was like, I mean, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. It was shot well. It was acted well. The execution, the kills, the gore, all that was great. But the story was very, just left me feeling dissatisfied. That's the best word for it. Dissatisfied by the story, by the conclusion. And so I went into the theater tonight thinking, well, I didn't love it. Didn't really. It was just kind of there. I just whatever. It's a very middle of the road film for me. I sat down tonight and all my expectations were drowned. They were gone. Had none. Let's just watch a movie. Came out. I still had some of the same issues, which we'll get to in spoilers, especially with the story. But my second opinion was, yeah, it was kind of fun. There was a little bit more 80s cheese in there, which I picked up on a little bit more the second time because I was just not so enamored with where's the story going. I was more like, let's just sit back and watch. And the 80s-ness of it all washed over me. The soundtrack washed over me. The performances washed over me. And Wednesday night, I had a decent-sized theater. There was probably, maybe 50 people in my theater. Tonight, it was fucking packed. Like, I had a big theater. I don't know if it's 200 people, but it was packed. I had people on every side of me, which I hate in the theater. I hate people sitting next to me, but it was packed. And everyone's reactions to the movie enhanced it a little bit for me because people were laughing at certain parts. People were, jumping at certain parts. People were kind of not screaming, but like reacting at certain parts. And when I left the theater tonight, I'm not saying that this is a flawless film. It certainly is not. And I'm certainly not sitting there saying, I think it's going to be one of my top 5 films of the year. I don't think it will be. But I did leave with a slightly different opinion saying, yeah, it was kind of fun. And I think if I would have had a slightly different expectation going in on Wednesday, I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more. So that's all I'm saying. I'm saying it as an honest moviegoer to say, when I saw it Wednesday, didn't love it, walked out saying, man, I'm kind of disappointed. Like, this is not what I wanted. And I went back in tonight with no expectations, and I walked out saying, you know what, that wasn't bad. No, that was all right. It was fun times in movies. So I'm just saying that as like perspective, because I know I prejudged this movie. This was Daredevil all over again, where I went in thinking, this is going to be my childhood. This is going to be my favorite comic book character. And then Ben Affleck showed up. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I'm
Leave
just
poor
saying.
Ben. Have you seen his face lately? The man's tired. Leave him out of this.
That's my non-spoiler review, and I mean that sincerely because I don't want people going in and thinking, wow, these guys really didn't like this movie. There's definitely elements of this movie I liked both times, but I liked it more upon a second viewing because I didn't go in thinking, man, this is the third chapter, this is the finale, this is the conclusion of the story, oh my God, I can't wait. None of that was there going in the second viewing, and I actually liked it more.
And I'll give you one little exit poll that I took because my brother, shout out to Schwink, he's out there on social media if you want to hit him up. Schwink was like, this is my favorite of the 3. He'd seen them all. He'd seen them all with me. He knows them all intimately. He knows Mia Goth. He knows the drill. He knows Ty West. And he said, this is my favorite. So there you go. You got Damon, who kind of likes it. Schwink, who's like, hell yeah. This is my top one of the trilogy, and I still haven't said anything yet, Damon. That's completely on purpose. I guess we'll have to wait till spoilers to find out.
Yeah. So I was gonna say Mia Goth. MaXXXine is in theaters right now. It was released obviously on Friday, so go check it out in theaters. And I know we say this all the time. People are probably sick of us saying this, but I'm gonna say it anyways. If you can, go see it in the theater. If you are even remotely a fan of the 80s, even if you didn't grow up in the 80s, you just like the 80s style, you've watched Stranger Things, and you're like, I enjoy the 80s. This movie feels like they ripped it straight out of like the Terminator in 1984. Like that's how well it looks of that era. Like this movie takes place in 1985, Terminator is 84. This is full on tech noir, let me tell you. Like they definitely got it right. So if you're a fan of the 80s, go see it and go see it in the theater. It's worth seeing in the theater. It's a great experience at the theater, so I will stress that. but it's in theaters right now. So as of now, we are getting into spoilers. So if you haven't seen MaXXXine, be forewarned. Patrick, I turn the table to you, sir, and you can kind of tell what you really want to say about this movie.
Damon, I have a history with Ty West pre-X, and it is that I'm not a big fan of his movies. They're slow, intentionally slow. That's his style. Hey, it just doesn't work for me. This need to be exacting, right? But this movie, like I said, is not a Ty West movie. And that might actually have been my problem with this movie. I don't know what this movie wanted to be. I've heard comparisons to Giallo, which I thought is apropos. But here's the thing with Giallo, which I actually really like Giallo. Giallo corny as hell. Giallo's goofy. Giallo doesn't age well. You just have to love it for what it is. You just have to accept that Giallo is what Giallo is. MaXXXine is a Giallo. Straight up and down. And it's like unapologetically a Giallo film. Which Giallo is the predecessor to, or the precursor to slashers. This is where slashers came from. They came from this detective genre from Italy. You always had to have black leather gloves and a shiny knife, and people had to be killed in dazzling ways, and there had to be sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That is MaXXXine. MaXXXine is a Giallo film. Now, we had one recently, last night in Soho, a couple years ago, by the great Edgar Wright, and you and I loved it. It didn't do very well. Giallo, for whatever, and I think Edgar Wright had a take on Giallo. I don't think it was like true Giallo. It was almost like better, really, what it was. It was like, let Edgar Wright make Giallo good, and that's what Last Night in Soho is. He made every bit of it just sing and shine. The end was a little weird. But we're talking about Ty West. Ty West says, no. When you make a Giallo, it has to kind of suck. Like, and I don't mean that because I'm not saying Ty West sucks. I think he's a good director, actually. He's just, sometimes he's so exacting with what he wants to do that it gets frustrating. This movie, at times for me, was like purely baffling. Now let's get into the plot and let's talk about why. But that's my take. Was I was like, oh no, Ty West came in and said, I'm making a Giallo for MaXXXine, and Giallo's characters do nonsensical shit. It can be kind of boring sometimes. There's a lot of talking, and maybe in the end you're like, why did that person do that at all? That makes no sense. We've talked about Giallos. We've covered a few on this show, much to the hilarity. Check out our New York Ripper episode. It's actually pretty hilarious, if I do say so myself, because it's baffling sometimes. Sometimes Giallos just don't make sense, and I've watched a lot of them. So Ty West goes and makes a Giallo, and he decides, for some reason, Damon, in this movie, and you see this in the trailer, MaXXXine's past is coming back to haunt her. She just landed this role with a serious director, very serious director. Elizabeth Debicki's character, very serious about horror. And this is MaXXXine fucking Manx's shot to become a superstar. You see that in the trailer. You know, Jamie Lee Curtis, she became a star. Brooke Shields, she became a star. I'm going to become a star from being in a horror film. But her past is coming back to haunt her in the form of Kevin Bacon, this private eye from Louisiana, who is being sent here by someone to drum up her past. And she has to stamp that down to make sure that she lives out her dream. Because, and Pearl, echoes this. Pearl wanted to be a star. Well, so the fuck did MaXXXine too. I'm not going to let my past get in the way of that. There's no fucking way. I can't let that happen. But the twist is that her past is not only just coming back, bubbling up from the darkness, it's coming back to kill her. And it's killing her friends. It's killing anyone around her. And it's closing in on her. Damon, I'm going to let you keep going on things on the plot that you want to talk about, and then we can kind of get into my problems with the movie, because I could go on like this for a while. I could Ty West this shit and sink the whole battleship, but I won't. I'm going to turn it over to the great Damon Martin. What parts of the plot do you think are worth like highlighting in a real serious way?
let me just backtrack one little thing there. You said giallo, and I agree with you to a certain extent. This is giallo, but it's also, I think it's more, if you, and I know you not, I know you're not, I'm not saying you're not a fan. I just know you're not like as in depth to his movies as I am. I'm a massive Brian De Palma fan, and because De Palma is one of Tarantino's favorite directors, and Tarantino is my guy. De Palma, if you look at a lot of his 80s films, Body Double, Dress to Kill, even Scarface, which is not a horror film, of course, but he injects a lot of that Italian flavor, that flair into his movies, but it's almost like Giallo 2.0, where he injects a little bit more drama, a little bit more seriousness, but also some kookiness, also some really funny, over-the-top scenes, a lot of sexuality. Not to say Giallo doesn't have a lot of sex. There's a lot of sexuality in Giallo.
Oh, a whole lot.
But I would say De Palma kind of perfected the American Giallo, if that makes sense. Like, other people have tried to make American Giallo films. I would say De Palma perfected the He takes the elements from Italian Giallo that he wants, and he injects a little bit more De Palma in it. So I would say when you look at Dress to Kill or Body Double, they are American Giallo, which is weird to say, but they're similar, but there's still a couple differences. I think that's more of what Ty West mimicked in this film was American Giallo, the De Palma Giallo. Very similar, but there are subtle differences. And if you watch a lot of De Palma films, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Go watch Body Double. Go watch Dress to Kill.
I watched those recently.
Subtle nuances where they're they're influenced by Giallo, but I call them American Giallo. So I would say that first off. I would say it leans more towards De Palma Giallo than Italian Giallo. Step 2, let's talk about the plot. So, of course, Maxine Minx is trying to make it big. She gets cast in this movie, The Puritan 2. It's a sequel. It's a big horror film. First one was a huge hit on home video, and now they're making a sequel. And they're filming it on the Universal lot. The real Universal lot, by the way, is where they actually filmed this movie. When you see, there's a couple times where they use the Psycho House and the Bates Motel. That's actually the Psycho House and Bates Motel. They were filming this on the Universal lot, which is crazy to think about, where they came from filming the first film and the second film in some random place in New Zealand to now literally filming it on the Universal lot where they had the run of the lot. There's actually a scene in a Western town, which was something they used from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, they got all these sets in there. So that's where we're at. Now, the past comment coming back to haunt Maxine. We're in spoilers, so I might as well just talk about it. I've told a couple of people who asked me what I thought. I refused to tell them anything, but I said, if you get a chance, go back and rewatch X before seeing this film. Because there is something tying back to X that comes back in this film. Now, if you go back and listen to our X review, I talked about it in there. I want to do a segment on the ending here in a minute about the big reveal. But I said I wondered if they would tie anything back. They did. The problem is they had set up this whole thing around the Night Stalker, around a slasher, around people around Maxine getting killed. But when you realize what's actually going on, it felt a little anticlimactic to me to what it was actually building towards. It just felt, I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. Again, I think this does go into expectation a little bit, because when they teased that somebody knows about the Texas porn star massacre, my initial thought was it had to have something to do with Pearl or something to do with one of her castmates who died, who never got justice for their deaths. None of that matters in this film. None of that matters. None of actually what happened in X matters in this film. But you still need to see X to totally understand what's happening. So I think that's where my biggest issue was, that plot point. The reason behind it all. I don't have a problem with using her past to come back to haunt her. And my opinion on films that are about films getting filmed. I love movies about the movie industry. This is ultimately a movie about the movie industry for the most part. This is Maxine getting her first big break in a big budget studio movie. I love all that. But it's the injection of this third element, particularly Kevin Bacon's character as a private detective. Now, Patrick, I like Kevin Bacon. I do. I like a lot of stuff he's been in. He did a show on Showtime a couple years ago called City on a Hill. Great show, crime show, takes place in the early 90s in Boston. He played a dirty FBI agent. Great show. I am a Kevin Bacon fan. But boy, did his character just take me completely out of this film, because his portrayal of a private detective was so buffoonish and over the top that he went from scary to stupid in a rapid fire hurry way. There's a creepy detective that we all know could be in this movie where it takes you into that he's a sleazy, scummy, just that you cross the street when you see this guy coming at you. This guy was like a cartoon character. I was never afraid of him. He was like the most buffoonish character in the movie, and I was like, it takes me right out of the film, because there's nothing scary about him. There's nothing creepy about him. He just looks like a doofus. And I'm just like, why is Kramer from Seinfeld the detective in this movie?
You know, you mentioned Brian De Palma. I love Carrie. Carrie's great. And I actually like the first Mission Impossible that Brian De Palma directed. I think it's really cool, like, to have De Palma do that, which is something so different than what he does. But I have a bit of a hot take about De Palma. Other than that, I've seen Dressed to Kill. I've seen Body Double. I don't think they're good movies. That's my opinion. I don't think they're good movies. And when you mention that, and Schwink, shout out to Schwink, he mentioned that too afterwards. He goes, these are very De Palma movies. I go, you're right, but I think those De Palma movies suck. The ones that he's like, the ones that he's homaging here, I don't like those movies. Ty West made those movies, and in those movies, the biggest problem I have with those movies is how stupid the characters are. Like, that, it's not the stylistic choices or the overt sexuality or the foggy lenses. I like all that shit because it's a cool stylistic choice. It is drilled right down to how baffling the characters behave and how dumb the stories are. That's my opinion on those. I know that's a hot take because people bow to the temple of Body Double and bow to the temple of Dress to Kill. I've seen them and I go, I don't get it, guys. I don't get it. You know how I feel about Rosemary's Baby? Same deal. I don't get it. I'm glad you like them. To me, these movies don't pass.
And to be honest, I obviously completely disagree with you because I love De Palma. I love Body Double, and I adore Dress to Kill. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Is Dress to Kill.
But okay, Adore is fine. Is it a good movie?
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. How?
It's a great movie.
What's good about it?
I mean, it's an incredible serial killer movie, and while I do bump up against some of the story in a modern age, not to get too deep into spoilers on Dress to Kill.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to get into Dress to Kill, but
yeah, but like the story itself is just a great character exploration, and I love the performances in that movie and the way it's shot. The style of the movie, and I love everything about that movie. I love Dress to Kill is my favorite De Palma movie. Now, Body Double, I enjoy Body Double as well, but Dress to Kill is my favorite De Palma movie.
Yeah, I mean, you're not alone. People love those movies, and I go, I don't see it. I just never have. I don't see it, and I know I'm in the minority. That's fine. So, but that translates very well to what I have problems with X, and Kevin Bacon's a great example of it. He's a cartoon. I could have feared Kevin Bacon, and his character is like way out in front. Really, he's kind of the herald for what's coming anyway, which you never see, which is the very, you could argue it's a little bit of a Body Double, but it's definitely the giallo idea of this gloved, leather-clad, shadowy figure who is out for MaXXXine. And that figure is sort of just slowly creeping closer and closer. But it's almost all Kevin Bacon Kevin Bacon is what's in front of that thing. And you're right, you're never scared of him. He's goofy. He's I say. He's like nothing, and MaXXXine's not scared of him. MaXXXine's not. She's just not frightened of this guy. She stands him down every time they come in contact with each other. So you don't ever feel in danger. So that's one element that I don't like. But that's not even the worst element of this movie. It's not. There is a deliberate and very, very troublesome pacing to this movie. Now, in X, you've got this young Maxine who is really trying to, she has designs on a bigger life, what I like about that movie is that everybody else in that movie fancies themselves bigger and better than she is. Even her boyfriend and all the other, the director, the other stars of the porn, and even Pearl in that movie, they all just seemed like Maxine, you get down here. This is where you belong, and she has to kind of rise up out of that. And that's what's so brilliant about X, is that she really just has to stand her ground and show that she's tough. Pearl, the movie Pearl, she in Pearl's kind of a beaten woman. She's less than, she's not smart. You stay on the farm and you wait for your husband. But she has designs on the world. Now she's not quite right, and that's what makes it interesting and all that stuff. But these were two characters with agency. Swing over to Maxine now. Maxine's been through hell. She's been through X. She's got her shot, and it's in jeopardy. And what do they choose to do with the pacing of this movie? And it's also edited by Ty West. He makes a good point to show, edited by Ty West. This movie is Maxine drives somewhere, stops, someone talks to her, talks at her, I should say, because there's very little back and forth. She'll drive somewhere, someone talks at her, a murder happens. She moves somewhere else. Someone talks at her. Someone gets murdered. She moves somewhere else. Someone talks at her. She moves somewhere else. She is not active in this movie. The movie is happening to her. And I'm like, no. X and Pearl, she was taking the reins. Mia Goth's characters were the ones that we were watching achieve. This is not that movie. This movie is, she goes somewhere, she gets talked at. And after a while, I could see it on her face. I could see it on, the person would be going on a long diatribe about something. They'd cut back to Mia Goth, and she had this look like, okay, keep talking. Okay, great, keep talking. Yeah, okay. So now I have to walk that way, thank you. And then she'd go walk that way. That's like a baseline, that's like a spinal problem with the movie. The movie lacks spine for this great character. This character that I've been invested in, that I'm into. They kneecapped her. They pulled her teeth. And so when the grand reveal, which I know we're about to get to, the grand reveal of who's after her, which, by the way, I saw coming from, I think, shot number one. Basically, I think within the first 15 minutes, I knew who was coming for her. By the time we get to that point in the movie, even that showdown, which let's talk about it soon here, Damon, even that showdown, I was like, she's still just sort of, it's just happening to her. And I couldn't believe how passive of a character she was in this movie. And that to me was a fatal flaw.
I agree with you to a certain extent, but I also disagree with you in one particular way. And that's because of who Maxine was in X, where she had these grand designs on being a star. And as you said, everyone around her thought they were already better than her. And she had to climb up from the depths and become who she becomes. I think there's still an element of that in this film where everyone, when they're talking to her, they're talking down to her. She's a porn star. She's a stripper. They're talking down to her. Now, the difference with this movie is that every time Maxine responded in X, it was almost like she had this air of confidence about her where she was almost like, yeah, okay, fuck you. I don't know a better way to say it without being vulgar,
Sure.
But, okay, sure, yeah, fuck you. In this movie, and I think part of it is because she's going into this mainstream world where it's almost like she has this air of confidence to her still, but she's also allowing people to talk to her, but she's absorbing this information, and deep down, she still knows she's better than these people. And I think a prime example of that, when it really shows through, the opening of the movie, she goes into this audition, this big, hangar of a studio, And she sits down in her chair, and there's two producers and a director. Elizabeth Debicki is the director. And then they got the camera on and everything, and they're doing an audition. And they're like, so Maxine, you've done adult films. And she basically explains, like, hey, I think acting is acting. Like, whether I'm doing it in that kind of film or this kind of film, I'm ready to cross over. And, they kind of question her, and, this is a bit of a controversy because very few people have ever crossed over, blah, blah, blah. And then they say, are you ready for the scene? And she's like, yeah. She's like, now you can read from the side. She's like, I don't need to. That was her way of thumbing her nose at the producer lady. Like, you can read from the line. She's like, yeah, bitch, I got it.
Yeah.
They did the scene. She was brilliant. Max, Mia Goth came full Mia Goth, really killed it. And when it was over, they're like, thank you. Oh, by the way, can you show us your boobs? Because it's obviously a topless world's 80s, whatever. And she does it. And that's the end of the audition. That's when the movie kicks off. And, that's when she walks out of the hangar. And this is where Maxine comes out because she walks by the row of blondes getting ready to audition. And she's just like, y'all better go home because I just fucking nailed it. That was Maxine. Because those girls were trying to be her. She dumbed herself down. She was very respectful. She knew that she was dealing with an industry where they were looking down at her, so she had to play a role. She was acting in that moment. But to the point of going back to Kevin Bacon's character, why it took me out of the movie so much was because at first, when she first meets him and she goes to this hotel, he shows her something from her past to prove that he knows something about her. So she goes to this hotel to meet him, and she first sits down, and she's judging him. She's feeling this guy out. And the more he talks, the more she figures out, this guy's a fucking idiot. I could get over on this guy in 2 seconds. I don't really need to think about it. And so by the time he finishes, he's like, here, my employer wants to meet you, whatever. She's already in her head like, this guy's a moron. And when he starts following her, which is probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie, she just stops her car, puts it in park, gets out, puts her keys between her fingers, and just beats the living shit out of this douchebag. And it's great because she doesn't fear him. He's a moron. I think that's the real Maxine. And I think that's also why it takes me out of the film, because she doesn't have an equal. She doesn't have Pearl was Maxine in that movie where everyone underestimated. She's an old lady. Just like when Jackson, who is Kitty Cuddy's character, goes out with the old man to look for his wife in the swamp, he's not thinking this guy's going to shoot me. He's an old man. Like, what's this old bastard going to do to me? And then he shoots him dead. I think in this movie it's the reverse, that where Maxine is the Pearl, where Maxine is underestimated. Once again, everyone's looking down on her. They're talking down to her. She's lesser than. But every single time she steps into a room, yes, they are talking at her. I'll give you that. But I took it as she's always the smartest one in the room, and she's doing it because that's how she has to do it. That's her being like, oh, sure, mansplain to me how I need to do this. And then she's going to turn around and fucking punch Kevin Bacon in the throat with a pair of keys. I'm not saying you're wrong. You're not wrong. I'm just saying that, like,
you're making a good point, though.
I took her character as, like, again, she was lesser than, so she had to pretend to be lesser than. But that key scene, walking out of the audition and telling all the other girls who are trying to be her, just go home, bitches. You're not going to get this role. I fucking nailed it. That was the real Maxine. She was putting on a role. That was the real Maxine.
You're not wrong, because that's the first scene of the movie, which we should be clear about. Like, that's how the movie opens. And when the movie was opening, the movie opened like that, and then she walks out and she goes, you might as well go home because I just fucking nailed it. And then she gets in her convertible Mercedes and zips off. Damon, I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up on 80s thrillers. I go, this movie perfectly opened like an 80s film, like perfectly. So I was like, oh, hell yes. Like, believe me, I loved that portion of the movie. And then you talk about her punching Kevin Bacon, punching the shit out of him because she doesn't have to fucking worry about this guy. That's still first act stuff. It's that I don't got problems with the stuff you just mentioned. The stuff you just mentioned is great because I was like, cool. Like, this first act, we're getting going. We're good. It's the second act and the third act that just go whomp. I mean, they just fall flat. And this is where I get into the whole, like, De Palma, Giallo, like, however you want to, I think both are fair assessments. characters start acting so bizarre. Michelle Moynihan and Bobby Cannavale play these two detectives who were, because her friend, played by Halsey, and another one of her friends from the strip club, they go up into a Hollywood Hills party and they get murdered. And then her friend who works at the video store, he gets murdered. These cops are just like, hey, Maxine, everybody who's around you tends to die. We need to look into that. And she doesn't want to play ball with them. Okay, cool. But it still turns out to just be they talk, she doesn't, and she walks away. I mean, like on a just like technical level, that's what happens in the movie. That's why I say it's a spinal problem with the movie, because it's not really like a taste thing. It's just like a structural problem. It's a mechanical problem with the movie, is that they talk and she walks away. But those two cops, those two detectives, they act so odd. Tell me you weren't like, why are they acting so weird? Like they just, like, it just didn't, it was so heightened. It started to feel, and I wrote this down in my notes. I go, this is feeling like a parody of 80s movies. It's no longer feeling like an homage. It's feeling like, let's make fun of 80s movies and how stupid they are. I know Ty West isn't thinking that. I'm just saying, like, the characters' behavior was so oddball, so goofy. I mean, we were laughing at what they were saying. I know it wasn't to get laughs. We were just laughing at how they were behaving. And I was like, yeah, that, like, this, intentionally or not, and I'm pretty sure it was unintentional, is now feeling like a parody. And even though that it had a killer opening 15 to 30 minutes, which I did enjoy, that's one of my big pros of this movie, is that it opens like a good, proper 80s movie. It just started to get real belabored. It got bogged down by this pacing. This just, I think is brutal. To me, the pacing was brutal, because even though I get what you're saying on a philosophical and I think story sense, you're totally right. Maxine knows better than all these people, but it translated into, they all talk a lot and she doesn't do much other than walk away from people as they talk. And then Damon, do you want to get into the ending of this movie, or what this movie is culminating in? Because I think maybe that might be, I watched a few horror creators talk about this. They were all a little befuddled by the ending. It might have been because they didn't have X right in the back of their brain, but I'll tell you right now, I knew the ending coming from a mile away. It's the opening scene gives away what is coming. Like, I figured it out so quick.
Okay, so two things I want to say. So I don't mind the big reveal, even though they pretty much spoiled it by the opening of the movie. The opening of the movie is literally a little young Pearl getting behind the camera, and her dad, like, basically telling her to dance and, do whatever. And he's like, you want a big star in the church? And then they end the thing with the quote we all know, which is, I will not accept a life I do not deserve. And that's her dad directing her. Now, I told Patrick, because I saw this on Wednesday night, and he asked me what I thought, and I said, I'm not going to tell you anything, because I don't want you to, because at that moment, I was not feeling it. So I didn't want to be like, dude, I didn't really love it, and you go and be like, shit, here we go. I'm glad we basically had the same conclusion coming out of the first time. My second time is where I started to come around a little bit more. But I told you, watch X again, because the big reveal ties directly back to X. Now, if you go all the way back to 2022 and listen to our X review, I don't remember if it's you or I specifically that pointed out. I know we talked about it. The big reveal in X is when you go into the convenience store, you see this religious program, this preacher program, devil's the devil, and the devil's Satan, And then when you go into Pearl's house, it's on, and then when the whole killing happens and Maxine drives off, it's still on the TV. This preacher program. And I know you remember in that episode, I said that was Pearl, or that was Maxine. She was the daughter they kept talking about in that whole thing. I thought at that point, I remember bringing this up on the podcast thinking, that's got to be what's happening in this movie. It's somehow tying back to that. It didn't, because I thought that's where they were going. They were trying to figure out that she was the person they kept referencing in these little vignettes of this preacher program. It wasn't, because that's what ties back into Maxine. Her father, dun dun dun, is the guy stalking her and hunting her down. He is still very much the moral majority. He is still very much, I voted for Ronald Reagan 10 times. That's how much he loves that guy. He is coming to get his daughter, who was stolen away from him by Satan and pornography and the world. I'm coming to get her back because she was stolen from me from a little girl. She was supposed to be this great bastion of Jesus, and now she's become the exact opposite of that. And so he's coming back to get her. Now, I don't have a problem with the dad being the big reveal of like the guy stalking her. I'm fine with that. And actually, in a weird way, remembering that I called that out in X, I was like, well, shit, at least they're proving me right that it mattered, because it seemed like at the end of X, that was one thing I brought up. It seemed like it didn't matter. It did, ultimately, because we get it here. And it's the same actor, by the way. It was a New Zealand actor, a local actor. They got to play those little vignettes in X. They brought him back and actually made him the dad. So it's the same guy. I don't have a problem with the dad reveal. I certainly don't have a problem with the whole moral, morality, Satan stealing our children. That was very 80s. They played a clip at the beginning of the movie during the opening montage where they showed Dee Snider going in and testifying before Congress. That's real. Yeah. The lead singer of Twisted Sister, the We're Not Gonna Take It guy, went and testified before Congress because they're like, lyrics are causing kids to do evil things and it's satanic messages and just dumb shit. Okay? And he actually did go and testify before Congress. That's where the whole parental advisory sticker came from. Back in the 80s, we didn't have those before. Now we still have them. To this day, there's a parental advisory sticker, explicit lyrics on album covers. That started in the 80s because a lot of people were like, oh my God, this bad lyrics and blah, blah, blah. So them playing into the times of the 80s of like this super preacher, this what's the one fucking guy who actually has, like, I'm not trying to offend people, but like the super pastor who like flies on jets and tells his followers, I need you to, yeah, Joel Osteen, that guy. He's like, I need a new private jet. God told me I need a new private jet. That guy, like one of those, just like, Saturday, Sunday morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, fucking those pastors, those preachers. That's her dad. And he's got a lot of power. So having that being the central storyline of her being the sinner and her dad, punishing her for being a sinner, I'm fine with all that. Whatever. Where I start bumping into like this really ludicrous twist is the whole Night Stalker angle. Because they're trying to get you thinking it's Richard Ramirez, the real Night Stalker, and he keeps branding people with this upside down pentagram. And here's where I'm like, this is so dumb. Even the two police officers, the detectives, who don't seem all that inherently bright in this movie, even they say, after catching Halsey and her friend who get dumped in a river, in a lake in Hollywood, and they find her right then and there, they're like, "Oh, this isn't the Night Stalker." They actually say it. So they're trying to sell you this whole time on the Night Stalker being the big villain in MaXXXine. You don't even really get to figure out it's not, because they tell you after the first murder. They're like, oh yeah, this wasn't. I was like, what was the point of bringing up the Night Stalker then?
It was really interesting because at first I was like, well before the two detectives say it, I said it. I go, this is a copycat killer. This is not the Night Stalker. And then the detectives confirm it. So then I went, okay, well, so that was a good misdirect for the trailer. I go, but exactly, like, how is this going to pay off? And I was like, fine. I was like, okay, like he's using the cover of the Night Stalker, but you're right, they diffuse it so quickly. So you're like, okay, well, it's definitely not the Night Stalker, but maybe he'll come up, and he doesn't, by the way. Spoiler alert. This Night Stalker has nothing to do with this movie, and I'm fine with that. Because actually, like, I'm sure you remember the American Horror Story series where they actually had the Night Stalker in it. It made me feel sick because if you know who the Night Stalker, he's a fucking awful human being. And like, I wouldn't like to see him glorified on screen. And I saw a little bit of American Horror Story and I was like, ugh, like, no, that's fucking gross. Like, he's a real despicable human being, like on a real bad level. So I'm glad he didn't become part of this movie. What got me was her father's intentions. And this goes right back to Giallo, goes right back to less De Palma. You're right. De Palma does it a little bit better. He took Giallo and tried to make a little more sense of it, like just a little bit. So this went really back to Giallo. When Dad finally reveals himself as this killer who has been basically luring women up to a private, by the way, it's private. It's like an abandoned mansion. Like these women went all the way into an abandoned mansion with no lights, no working anything. They just walked in looking for the party. He kills them because he's hoping to lure MaXXXine there. Hoping one of them ends up being MaXXXine. He's trying to look for MaXXXine. He's trying to get her up into the hills. And I was like, well, okay, but he's killing them because he's like, clearly they're not my daughter, so I've got to kill them. He also was intending on killing MaXXXine. And I'm like, why? And the why seems to be, and help me, Damon, because you've actually seen it twice. So I'm legitimately like, maybe you can make it clearer for me. If I'm not mistaken, he is going to make this video where he kills her and then puts the video out to make her famous for being a sinner. And instead of like going like, I want my sheep back in my flock, my wonderful, beautiful daughter who I started with all this at the video at the beginning of the movie, all that time ago, there's a life that you deserve. He didn't want to bring her back to the flock. He just wanted to make a real bad example of her. Am I getting that right?
You're not. And this is what the second viewing got.
Okay, help me out, please.
Okay, so I didn't pick up on it either. So to be fair, you're not alone in this. I had to watch it a second time to pick up on this. They actually say it, and he mentions it when he finally reveals himself, when he talks about Halsey's character and the other people. He wasn't trying to necessarily, yes, he was in a way trying to lure her up there by going after her friends. What he says and what he actually when he mentions it to her, and when we find out he also killed Lily Collins' character, who's from the original Puritan, he lured her up there and killed her too. He said that I gave them all a chance to repent, meaning he gave them all a chance to say, I denounce sin and I am now a follower of Jesus. When they didn't do that, he put the brand on them and killed them. So he gave MaXXXine that same choice. When he said, I'm performing an exorcism, and he actually goes up and whispers in her ear and says, now let the performance begin. He's hoping she'll snap back into his beautiful little girl and she'll say, oh, praise Jesus. I'm healed. I'm cured. Jesus is, Satan's out of me. And when she doesn't repent, when she clearly is not, giving in to his desire, that's when he pulls out the brand and says, the devil is still in you. He's not trying to just go on this rampage and slaughter. Well, ultimately that's what he does. He actually says when he kills Halsey and he kills her friend, he kills the other people, he's trying to get them to repent. When they don't repent in whatever version of fucked up version of his repent is, then they don't, and he kills them. So there is a little bit of method behind the madness, because he wants to get her back. He doesn't want to kill her. He wants her to be the MaXXXine from that video at the opening when she's like, yes, Daddy, I want to be a star in the church. So he actually is trying, in a really odd way, to save her. But it's his fucked up way of doing it, and he's filming it because he thinks this is going to be the documentary that's going to show that Satan has a hold of Hollywood. And he's using his daughter as an example that either she's going to repent and come back to him and say, I denounce Hollywood, it's all evil, it's all Satan, it's this, it's that, or she's going to get branded and die like everybody else. So he gives her that choice. Now, here's where I run into a problem, though. He actually says this to her, and he tells her about Halsey as well. I gave them the chance to repent, and they didn't, so they had to die. I'm not quoting here, but that's more or less what he says. He's saying this to MaXXXine, right? She has a fucking gag in her mouth. How is she supposed to repent? How is she supposed to say, Daddy, I'm cured, Satan's gone? That's what he wants her to say. He wants her to, I gave them the chance to repent. What does that mean? He gave them the chance to repent. So he took out the gag and they said, praise Jesus, or they didn't? Maxine's got a fucking gag in her mouth. How is she supposed to repent? But that's the explanation. He was trying to get them to repent, and when they didn't, he killed them.
That makes total sense. I see what you're saying, but it's just, again, back to a story problem with this movie.
I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way. I'm not disagreeing.
I know. No, totally. You're just clarifying, which is good. Okay, I see the patterns. I see what you're talking about. It all makes sense. Well, it doesn't, because the problem, it's not that it doesn't make sense, like, as the story lays itself out, is that structurally in the movie, it doesn't feel earned at all. Those deaths happen off camera. Even Lily Collins has a pretty gory death. That happens completely off camera. You just see the aftermath of it. If they had, and I think they showed, let's see, whose did they actually show? They showed, oh shit, who's
her friend? They showed her.
They showed Leon's. They showed
Yeah.
Leon's death. If there was some thematic way to make that death feel like it's walking towards that, I would have been into it. If Damon, now call me crazy, if he had taken out one conversation that Maxine had to sit through and showed Halsey and the other friend's death and thematically made those build towards that dad scene, you don't have to give anything away. You could even still done the whole misdirection with the Night Stalker thing. You know, maybe you could have, like, you know, because I know, you know, the Night Stalker claimed himself to be a Satanist, or he worshipped Satan, or he was Satan. I can't remember what he thought. You could have played that. You could have played that double entendre for those things, and you could have earned it. You could have worked towards it. What they do is they just dump it on you at the last minute. They basically exposition dump at the very end. What was this all about? I'll tell you what it's all about. No, like reveal the magic trick to me. Let it all unfold. Let it all be thread through this movie, and it didn't.
Can I give you a slight rewrite of The Living Dead and see if you would have liked this better? Just my version. Let's eliminate the opening so you don't get the dad scene. You just get Maxine.
And I understand why they did that, because I think some people didn't see X, so that is a way to make it thematically wrap up.
But let's just go to this. Okay, so the big mystery is we got this leather glove clad bad guy who's apparently omnisciently powerful and all this other money. And I get he's, you know, religious guy. He's got a TV show. He's got money. Okay, I'm fine with all that. And they keep teasing. He's like this powerful guy. You wouldn't want to meet my boss. All this other shit. Why, if the big reveal is that it's her dad? Okay, again, I'm fine with that. That was actually a good callback to X, because when X was over, that was the one question I had. Like, why was that in there? Like, I thought that was going to tie back into it. It didn't, and they made it pay off here. Okay, cool. I'm good with all that. But if you don't know it's their dad, then why couldn't we have? Because this whole movie, they have the protesters outside the studio. Satan is evil. Satan stole my daughter. All this stuff. Like, we know, and that's real. That was a real time.
Oh, yeah.
Satanic panic was a real thing in the 80s. Then why couldn't they just have Halsey and her friend and Lily Collins getting lured into this mansion, and then when they get there, you see it's this guy, whoever it is, saying, you're a sinner, and you're going to pay for your sins. This is classic religious movie, horror movie shit. Why couldn't they show him preaching to them and saying, you're the problem, Hollywood is evil, you're luring people in, you're a sex worker, you're a porn star, you're an actor, whatever it is you're doing, that's the escalation. Now, why they killed Leon, I have to assume, is because he was gay.
Right.
That they didn't even give him a chance to repent, because they're like, yeah, you're gay, so you're fucking dying. So that's all it was. But if they would have at least taken that extra step to say, this is what it's about a morality. This is us saying sinners need to die, either repent or die, and they all die. You don't ruin the reveal by revealing the guy behind the hood. The guy behind it all is her dad. That doesn't, having that as the central plot of this is why it's happening, that it's this, God majority saying you're sinners, you got to pay for your sins. That doesn't ruin. If the big reveal is it's her dad, then why does it matter that we know why they're doing it? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, because As you said, they don't show any of the killings, and they're trying to put it off as this Night Stalker thing, which they diffuse.
They diffuse immediately.
And they're like, oh, it's not the Night Stalker. What the fuck was the point of that? If they would have just said it's this, and they actually showed it happening, because they show you Halsey getting pulled into this room, she's got a mask on, she's got a gag on, and then they just end. That's over.
Right. You don't know what, you don't know why. Yeah.
If they would have showed it preaching to her, you need to repent, and she's just quaking with fear and whatever, and they just kill her anyways, you realize this is a guy or a group or a cult going after people in Hollywood who are sinners. I'm fine with that plot, and I'm fine with actually showing the cool kills. And then you can still reveal that the guy at the end, the guy behind it all, the Oz behind the curtain is her dad. None of that is ruined by having that plot in there. So that's where I really bumped up against it, because when the big reveal is made, it's all about sin, it was all about Satan, it was all about this, and I'm your dad. And I'm like, why didn't they just... That other part could have been permeated throughout the movie. It doesn't ruin anything.
I mean, the only reason why I think if I'm in Ty West's shoes, I wouldn't have gone with your specific rewrite is that you'd go, there are going to be hardcore fans of X who will see that coming a mile away. And so that's why I was like, you could still blanket it in something else. You could make it more ominous. You could make it a little bit more mysterious. You could show some ritualistic behavior. Again, maybe don't just immediately defuse that it's not the Night Stalker. Like, just tease it a little bit. Tease that there's some ritualistic aspect to it. And they almost started to do with Halsey, and then they pull the plug right before you see anything. So you get nothing. But again, what killed me about this movie was that they traded stuff like that for long conversations. And I mean long. Tell me if you didn't start, even on your second viewing, zoning out at some of Elizabeth Debicki's diatribes. They were long diatribes about filmmaking. I know you like films about filmmaking. I have grown tired of them because it's a thing. All filmmakers do it. They go, I'm making a film about filmmaking. Okay, cool. Like, yes and no. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I just get tired of that. They keep going to that well. And what I felt that this movie was ultimately doing was that this story, this wrap up, MaXXXine is the story of Ty West breaking into the big mainstream. And there is a long speech that MaXXXine gives near the end of the movie that basically says, like, I have crawled through the muck, meaning, she was a porn star and a stripper, and she crawled out of that reputation and she broke out and she became a star. In the end, by the way, guys, as baffling as that crazy dad thing happens, she blows his head off in front of a bunch of cops in a helicopter, and they accept it. They go, cool, okay, you're fine. We don't even need to give you a manslaughter charge. You just go back to making your movie. Like, that's literally how this movie wraps itself up. But she says, I've crawled through the muck to get here. And now I'm here, and you're going to have to deal with me because I was destined to be here in this place. I was destined to be a star. I heard that as Ty West saying, and this is written solely by Ty West, is saying, like, I have toiled away for almost 2 decades making genre stuff my way. I did it my way. And I think, like, when he compares himself to the stripper / porn star, he's saying, like, yeah, genre film didn't get me a lot of respect in this business. And now I'm here and I'm claiming my respect. I'm earning it here, right now. MaXXXine is me saying, I'm here, I've done it, I've crawled my way to this point, and now there's nothing you can do about me because I'm undeniable now. And I don't even think that's in a cocky way. I think that's just in a like, this is my journey. This is where I've come. I was young, fresh-faced Ty West way back in the early 2000s. Now I've got long gray hair. I've been working my ass off to get to this point, and I deserve it. And it's okay for me to take a victory lap. That's kind of thematically what I think this movie's actually about. And maybe some of that was in X too. Maybe I kind of missed it. I haven't seen X in a while, but maybe that was maybe that's the closing of all of this, is just to say, like, yeah, I'm a genre filmmaker, but now I'm here and I'm right in front of you. And I'm Ty West, and get ready because it's only just begun.
Yeah, I can see that, and I can see the correlation between the two. But I also think this is I think also there's an element of that of he does that for Mia Goth as well, because if you
Hmm.
watch if you watch the progression, the evolution of Mia Goth in these movies, the first movie she's very much a stripper and porn star. There's a lot of nudity, a lot of like graphic scenes. There's a lot of, she's like, it's very much like skin-sational movie. And then you get to Pearl, and it's more of a character study and more of like, let's see what Mia Goth can actually do. Not to say she doesn't act good, she doesn't act well in X. She's great in X. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of other elements moving in that movie in particular. And I think a lot of people at the beginning didn't know she was also playing the killer. Like, she was also playing Pearl the killer, the old lady, and Mia Goth. So Pearl in that movie and X was her acting. MaXXXine in that movie was her being the like, here's your tawdry sex skin, that kind of movie, a sensational movie. Then he does Pearl, and that's a character study, and that is like, all right, let me thumb my nose at everyone and say, here's how good Mia Goth is, motherfuckers. Like, this is how good she is, and boy is she good in that movie. And I think it's almost like a parallel to what you're saying of Ty West. This is his version of saying, like, I'm here, now you're going to have to deal with me. I also think that's his love letter to Mia Goth saying, she's here, you better fucking deal with her. Because now, in the middle of all this, she got cast in a Marvel movie that we may never actually see. But that was a big deal. Like, that's a big deal. I don't care if you love Marvel movies or not, but getting cast in a Marvel movie, for better or worse, is a big deal. She got a major role in a Marvel movie that we may never see, but she got cast in it. And so I think this is also a little bit of Ty West's love letter to Mia Goth saying, we're both here, now deal with us. Like, Mia Goth is not a conventional, if you look at her body of work, nothing she's done has screamed A-list actor. Nothing. She's a good actor. Everyone who knows her likes her, but she's very much an indie darling. She is, what's her name? The girl from Men.
Oh yeah. Oh shit. Now you're gonna make me look her up because I
I'm
gotta
gonna
know
make you
that
look
name.
the name. God, I can't remember her name.
I know it's so dumb. She got my number one actor for that year too.
What is her
Oh
name?
God, why can't I
She
think
also
of
has
the
a
name?
band. She's in a band too. What's her
She's
name?
great. She's great. My
Uh,
internet's being slow.
what is her name, Patrick? You gotta pull it up here. What is her
I'm trying to
name?
pull it up. It's being slow. It's not
Hold
even
on, let's
pulling
see.
up.
Jessie
I'm trying.
Buckley. There's the
Jesse
name. Jessie
Buckley.
Buckley.
Thank you. Yes, Jesse
Jessie
Buckley.
Buckley, same kind of thing. Jessie Buckley, she's not there to be an A-list celebrity. She's not there to be the top draw on a block. She's not going to be an Independence Day 3 or whatever for Jurassic Park 9 or whatever they're doing. She's an indie darling. She wants to be in Men. She wants to be in those kind of, and I'm fine with that. And I think that's Mia Goth also to a certain extent, but I think there's a correlation, a parallel there where it's like a bit of both of it, where he's also saying, like, look how good she is, and now you're going to have to deal with her because she's going to be on everyone's list at the end of the year to say, we need to cast Mia Goth in something. And I think when you watch MaXXXine, there's only one scene of her nudity. And that is when she does the flashback of X, where she pops in the video that someone sends her, and it's that scene from X where she's doing her porn scene with Kid Cudi. That's it. The scene where they say we need to see your breast, they do it from the back. When she goes into the porn club, she's not acting. When they go in the strip club, she's not stripping. I think this is also, that's where I got more of the parallel, not so much Ty West as it is Mia Goth. He's like, guess what? I don't need to show her nude in this movie. I don't need to show her. She's the fucking A-list now. She's deciding what she does. She's going to tell you, yeah, I'll do this or I won't do this. So I think while I do agree, I do see that parallel. I also think it's just as much about Mia Goth to him because I think he's kind of like she's kind of become his muse in a way.
Oh yeah, no, you're totally right. I think it parallels them both. I think it's a story of them both. I think the Elizabeth Debicki character, I was like, I hope he isn't modeling himself after her because she is way too self-important. Oh my God, the long diatribe she goes on about the importance of filmmaking and how it's going to change the world. Not that I don't think filmmaking is important. I love it as an art form. It's fantastic, but also fucking relax a little bit. Like relax. Like you're not saving the world with movies. You're expressing important emotions and all that great stuff, and we need art. I support it, of course. I'm obsessed with it. But calm the fuck down. Like, please don't tell me that's how you see yourself, Ty West. Please tell me you feel like you and the character of Maxine and Mia Goth all together are kind of walking hand in hand through the doors, slamming the doors of Hollywood open and saying, "We're here, motherfuckers. Now what?" You know, like I'm more on that level. I'm kind of hoping that he meant for that character to be about the pretension of Hollywood, because God, and she was like, not Elizabeth Debicki's a great actor, but just what she would say, what came out of her mouth. I was going, that's what makes people hate filmmaking, by the way. Like when you talk like that super self-important shit, just ugh. Like, you know, maybe it was that. But yeah, I could see the parallel between Maxine, Mia Goth, and Ty West all wrapped into one as just sort of saying, we have arrived.
And I also, real quick, before we get on to categories, I do want to say that we've talked about this on this show many times where, like, I don't ever want to sit down and watch a movie and I feel like when it's over, I need to have it explained to me.
Yeah.
Because things don't make sense. There's just too much symbolism. And I've had this experience with a lot of the indie horror films where people watch it and they're just like, oh, it was an analogy for this, or it was a symbolism of this. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of get it, but I also think this movie was bullshit. Because that's what Men was to me. I get what they were doing in Men, but when it was over, I was just like, this was just some arty, stupid bullshit. And you just went way too, like, you had it, you started strong, and then you just ended with a fucking thud. I feel like that was Elizabeth Debicki's character in this movie, where everything was so. She's making a fucking horror film, a slasher horror film, and a
slasher sequel.
And she's making it sound like she's making fucking Schindler's List. Like, holy shit, lady. I know you're not a big Tarantino guy, but Tarantino did a full book of like his favorite movies on film. It was his second book after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he takes like sections of the book and he just says like Rolling Thunder, that movie that I've talked about before, Revenge Stiller from the 70s, starring William Devane. And he just has a whole chapter, like his history with the movie, him seeing it for the first time, why he loves it, and why it means so much to him. And what I like about Tarantino, and if you listen to Tarantino talk about film, even if you don't like Tarantino's films, his perspective is more of the everyman. Like, I like seeing cool shit in movies. I like seeing cool action scenes, I like seeing cool, dialogue. I like seeing cool stories. And if you watch a Tarantino film, like it or not, they're not overly complicated. He might have a couple of things like, where he does the out of sequence story like Pulp Fiction, but it's not hard to understand his movies. You're not walking out saying, what? Like, who is the killer? What? He doesn't do that. And when you read that book of his, and like he does a section on Deliverance, and he does a section on, I think, Carrie, if I'm not mistaken. He does a whole big section on De Palma. He's a big De Palma guy. But he does a whole thing on that. He talks like a movie fan, a film fan. He's not saying, well, hold on now. This was a true dissection of the American experience landing as Irish people in New York, and you're like, dude, you're talking about Scream. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, huh? You know what I'm talking about? The self-important film critics when they're
do it all the time. They do it all the time. And they're like, what this really was a parallel to? And when John Carpenter goes, no, Halloween was just about a big guy with a knife killing people. It's not. You think it's about something else. I made it. It's not about anything else. It's about a big guy killing people. Fucking get over it. Like, get over yourself.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And when you read that book, it's Tarantino just being a film fan. Like, he's just like, yeah, it's got some fucking cool kills and it's got a fucking great revenge plot. I think that is a little bit where Ty West gets a little bit lost in Maxine, because I do see him kind of making that statement when it doesn't really need to be made, because guess what? Mia Goth did get cast in a Marvel movie that we may never see. So like, let it go. Like, you don't need to hammer us over the head that you've made it. She's made it. We get it. Everyone's excited about this film. Yeah, I think there's a little bit too much self-importance in there, and I think Elizabeth Debicki's character is a great example of that, where she kept droning on, and I'm just like,
I mean, droning on.
I'm like, lady, you're making a fucking sequel to a slasher. Calm down.
She's still talking. I'm clocking this. She's still going.
Yeah, that was probably my big. But and to be fair, this isn't all that. For anyone who has, like,
no, it's not. It's not. But like that's what her moments were in the movie. Like, and then there's other people's moments. Sure.
Yeah, but like, if you take Elizabeth Debicki's character out, and she's just like a normal, regular director. I think you don't get bludgeoned quite as much with the whole importance of like this movie making experience, and I understand what they're going for, but it's a little over the top and feels a little, like, all right, we're getting a little preachy here about a fucking slasher scene.
Yeah, it's a little. It's what makes people fucking hate filmmakers. Like, don't lean into that.
Yeah. All right, let's get into categories. Let's kick things off as we do each and every week here on the show, and let's talk about best performance. Patrick, I would love to sit here and say we're going to have two great picks here. We're not. We're going to have one pick. Same pick. Please. The floor is yours.
Come on. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Bobby Cannavale. No, I'm kidding. It's Mia Goth. Mia Goth, of course. Mia Goth as MaXXXine is, listen, she is the heart and soul of this trilogy. She inspired and helped co-write Pearl. She really, had to carry X, which I think X was a bit of a misdirection. I think people thought like Jenna Ortega's character was actually kind of the main character, and they do kind of a switcheroo on you a little bit. And then, the double idea of she's playing both Pearl and MaXXXine in the same movie. And then when we get to MaXXXine in this movie, MaXXXine is fully realized. Nothing can stop her. It's too late. You fucked up. You let the doors of Hollywood open. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to fight my way through. I think that's what Ty West meant to make out of this movie. Whether he succeeded or not, that's up to your interpretation. But I think that was the whole point. It was just to say that, like, she did it. She's so tenacious. She came from hell, quite literally. I mean, she escaped the Texas porn star massacre. She did it, and she got to Hollywood, and she even broke out of porn and became a star. Like, that is Mia Goth carrying us through that story, because she's the anchor to all of this. And without her, you don't get this story. I'm not saying that like no one could have told this story the way Mia Goth told it. I just love the way Mia Goth told it. I love what she put behind the character. And I know that like maybe she's not everybody's cup of tea. I know she's even got a little bit of controversy out there. I don't know. I don't delve deep enough to understand it or know what it's all about. But what I do know is she's a dynamite performer. That when she's on screen, she's magnetic, and I'm here for it, Damon. Whenever she decides to end up being in a Marvel movie, however many decades that takes, I'm there. I'm gonna see it. I'm gonna see whatever Mia Goth is in. I want to go see.
So for all the kind of criticisms we've had about this movie, and again, to be clear, as I've said earlier, I just want to say it again here, I definitely enjoyed it more on the second viewing than I did the first, because I did go with zero expectations, and I was like, yeah, it was kind of a fun, goofy, I mean, it was a great homage to the opulent, sparkly 80s and also the very dark and dour 80s that were kind of simmering underneath of all the glam and the neon lights and things like that. It was a pretty good portrayal of that. Still have bumped up against some of the parts of the ending, but again, I didn't mind it. But I loved Mia Goth, and she was great in X, she was brilliant in Pearl, and she's once again a show stealer here. She understands this character. While this was a character that Ty West wrote, she made it.
Oh, yeah.
She made it. Now, I'm not, as you said, I'm not saying someone else couldn't have done it, but could someone have done it as well? No, I don't think so. I mean, there's a story out there, not to keep bringing up Tarantino, I just saw this the other day, somebody talking about this, that, Christoph Waltz, who won an Oscar for playing Colonel Hans Landa in Inglourious Basterds, there was a rumor, I don't know how true it is, but there was a rumor that was originally going to be Leonardo DiCaprio in that role. And Leonardo DiCaprio is my favorite actor He's my favorite actor working today. But they ultimately cast Christoph Waltz because he spoke German. He was German. And they just felt like he would fit the role better. Now, I love Leonardo DiCaprio, but I couldn't imagine anyone playing that role but Christoph Waltz. He is brilliant. That was one of the greatest performances on cinema in history. That's an incredible performance. So could someone else have played MaXXXine? Sure. Could anyone have done it as well as Mia Goth did and made it her own? I don't think so. So I think that's what makes this such a special performance through all three movies. And once again, Mia Goth steals the show. And unlike X, where you were kind of given that diversion of like there's this burgeoning star named Jenna Ortega in our film, because that was right when Scream came out, the Scream 5 came out, and everyone's like, ooh, Jenna Ortega's in another horror film. She's the star. And for a minute, it kind of seems like she would be. And then Mia Goth steals the show. And then, of course, Pearl comes out. She's, of course, the star. I think this is almost like we know she's the star now. Let's see what she can do. We gave her the fast car. Let's see how many times she can get around the track or how fast she goes around the track. She's zooming at this point, Patrick. She steals the show. She's incredible.
She's great. I really do. I really do enjoy her and everything I see. I think, we loved Infinity Pool. She's a big reason why. You know what I mean? She comes onto the screen and lights it on fire. I mean, really does. Like, that doesn't feel hyperbolic to me. Like, there's something about her that she can just do that. And even though I have tons of issues with this movie, it's not like my issue was her. My issue was not enough her, actually.
Yeah, give me more. And I'll say this also. There's very few actors where I'll say, like, no matter what they do, I'll watch, or directors. Like, I will watch anything Leonardo DiCaprio's in. I'll watch anything Margot Robbie is in. I'll watch anything that Quentin Tarantino writes or directs. Obviously, we're Scorsese fans. I'll come out of this and I'll be honest. Anything Mia Goth does, I'll watch now, because that's how much of an impression she made upon me with these three movies and Infinity Pool, which we both absolutely loved as well. Go back and listen to that review. We were very glowing on that review as well. I love her, and I want to see what else she does. So, yeah, I'm in. I'm on the Mia Goth bandwagon from here on out. So, whatever she does next.
Amen.
Patrick, our next category doesn't come up every week, but occasionally there's a performance in a film that warrants our next category.
One testicle!
Named after the great Nicolas Cage in Prisoners of Ghostland, when he just fucking goes for it, man. Is it great? I don't know. That's up to the eye of the believer. But Patrick, this is our one testicle award, and you had a specific one for this movie, although I have one also. Who is your one testicle award winner for MaXXXine?
I'm so glad you had one also, because I was like, this movie, aside from Mia Goth, who we just praised, is sort of surrounded by testicles. Forgive the imagery, but this is a one testicle movie. And I think it's very much by design, by the way. I think these characters are meant to be heightened, but I do believe certain characters went so far over the top that it did end up bordering on parody. Now I digress. My one testicle award is going to the great Kevin Bacon. Okay, he plays, and we talked a little bit about it, this Southern drawly New Orleans like sleazeball private dick, as he calls himself, private eye, private investigator. But he is so over the top. And I was like, when he first comes kind of onto screen, you go, okay, well, maybe I'm just getting a kind of little taste of him. Maybe it's not the whole thing. Next scene, it goes bigger. Next scene, it goes bigger. Next scene, it goes bigger, to the point where I was just like, he's a fucking cartoon character. And I think a lot of actors want to do roles like this. I don't think he made a mistake. I think he's a very seasoned actor at this point. He fully intended to just get higher and higher and higher up. Maybe he and Ty talked about this and said, you are the comedy of this movie. You are the reason people should laugh. Now, Damon, you went to a second showing. You saw two showings. Your second showing was super packed. My showing was like packed, but it wasn't super packed. But it was packed. Was he getting all the laughs? Was it working? Was it succeeding? Because he certainly got the one testicle award about 30 minutes into this movie. I was like, he's the guy. He's my one testicle. There's no doubt about it. And he did not disappoint.
No, he didn't get the laughs, and I think what I did hear were a couple like almost like goofy like guffaws in the theater. Like, oh
Like what
Jesus,
the fuck?
yeah, like that's kind of what I got. And I want to say this: I'm not an actor, just a fan. I've been to New Orleans, love New Orleans, love Louisiana, and I have a lot of friends I know from Louisiana, and also cover a lot of fighters in my day job from Louisiana. While there are Creole accents that are pretty thick that you can get down there, I've now heard Kevin Bacon pull out the Louisiana New Orleans accent twice. He also did it in a little movie called JFK, which he has a very small role in that. Patrick, I want to say this with all the love and respect and admiration in the world, and I will say I am a Kevin Bacon fan. Kevin, you're probably never going to listen to this, and if you do, you probably don't give two shits what I have to say. But I'm going to say it anyways. My man, stop doing Louisiana accents. Because both times, they're not good. And if you're from Louisiana and you tell me that's exactly what Louisiana folks sound like, I'm going to disagree with you because I've been to Louisiana. I know people from Louisiana. No one sounds like that in either movie. One is from 1992. One is from 2024. It never got better.
He's had a lot of time to work on it, and it's not working. But the character is so big, and it wasn't getting any laughs in mine at all. It was getting what you're saying, the guffaws. Like, really? Like, are they really doing this right now? But I still think it's by design. I still think 100% Ty West and Kevin Bacon together decided, like, yep, we're going this big. We're gonna do it. Sometimes you take a swing and you miss. It's my opinion that they missed in this instance.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in, and yeah, it was almost like a foghorn leghorn performance.
Very much. I'll say. I was like, what are we doing right now?
I'll say, Maxine, you're the porn star. It was a lot. It was like I'm not even trying to pull out a bad Louisiana accent. Just go watch Kevin Bacon, the other bad Louisiana accent. Patrick, my one Tesla award, while you are correct, there are a couple that could get it here, but the one that I thought was just, if it wasn't Kevin Bacon, it was this. Simon Prest as Ernest Miller, a.k.a. Maxine's father. Now, let me tighten my glasses up here and say this. I understand the over-the-top preacher. I grew up in a Southern Baptist area, so I understand like over the top, shouting, proselytizing preacher. I get it. I also remember a great little show called True Detective in season 1 when they had that preacher who was very over the top and loud and boyish. I get it. I understand that.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a difference between that and, again, going cartoonish and comical. Now, I appreciate that Simon Prest was in X as the pastor that they were not intending to probably ever bring back because X was just written as a one film. They never intended to make MaXXXine at the time. So a local New Zealand actor was brought in to do those scenes as the pastor. Okay. For sake of continuity, they brought him back. Now, Patrick, I'm just being honest here. They could have brought back any guy that looked kind of like that, and I don't think anyone would have noticed a bit of a difference. But this guy was so animated and so over the top that I felt like he didn't sound to me like an old schooly pastor. He sounded like he was doing the American version of Kevin Bacon, where he was just like, the Lord is going to save you, Jesus. And I was like, dude. Like,
how about his reveal? Like it was literally like a comical, and this felt very De Palma to me, but it was very like he swings around and goes, woo, right in her face. And I was like, huh? Like, are they fucking with us? Like, I couldn't tell. Like, it was tonally so imbalanced in these moments that I was confused.
He literally did jazz hands. He
literally
turns around to her and he goes, Woo! He does jazz hands.
Yeah, and I was like, huh, like I don't know. And you've seen it twice, so it still felt that way to you, where it was like this almost doesn't fit the tone of this movie at all.
He's wide-eyed. Like there's a lot of cocaine in this movie.
Oh yeah,
It
there's a lot.
felt like, it felt like a lot of the budget was snorted by him to do those scenes, because everything he did, he was wide-eyed and he was so animated, and it took me out of it, because the concept of him being this vengeful preacher who's trying to save his daughter and kill sin in Hollywood. Okay, I'm good with all that. And I'm not saying he had to play the role the way I wanted him to play it. I would certainly never tell an actor to play the role I want them to play it. But he was so over the top and so animated. There was nothing scary about him. There was
no.
like he was so, it was like the Kevin Bacon character. He was so goofy with the whole jazz hands thing, and his eyes were constantly like this, wide eyed, like he looked like
real wide, yeah.
He was like, I just downed a 12-pack of Red Bull and 2 lines of Coke, and I'm good to go for the night, boys and girls. I'm going to drive cross country. Like, he was just so animated that it just took me out of it, because there was nothing scary about him. I've seen a lot of movies with scary preachers, and that was not him. And his performance was just like, again, I think whatever real Coke was on set, Simon went around and found it, had a couple lines, and then did his role.
And again, this is Ty West we're talking about. He's a very exacting director. He meant for these scenes to go this way. I guarantee you they did them until he got them the way he wanted them. And then he edited the movie himself. So he chose the best takes as far as he was concerned. Maybe this is a situation like, how like Toby Hooper said, Texas Chainsaw is a comedy. Like, and no one can see it. Like no one's ever gone, yeah, it's actually kind of funny. Like Toby Hooper goes, no, this is a comedy. Maybe Ty West is like, you guys don't see this. MaXXXine's a comedy. It's not a De Palma movie. It's not a fucking Giallo. It's a comedy. Maybe that's what it is. That's entirely possible. There's other characters. We didn't even get into Giancarlo Esposito's character, who's rather comical in this movie. He got a lot of laughs. Again, I don't know if those laughs were appropriate or not. It was hard to tell. Tonally, this movie's all over the fucking place. But
a lot of people in my theater laughed when they saw his hair for the first time as Giancarlo.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm pretty sure they're intending for him to have like a toupee. It's supposed to look like a bad hairpiece, I think. It's hard to tell. This movie's very ambiguous that way.
Let me throw an idea at you. I'm sorry to do this to you. I just want to throw this out there. You talked about House of the Devil before. I know you're not a fan of that movie.
Right.
It's not my favorite either. But you said your favorite part of that movie is Tom Noonan, which we talked about in Monster Squad.
Yep.
How much better would this have been if Tom Noonan was the father? Because Tom Noonan has a very creepy, just a very, like, he's terrifying without trying to be terrifying. Imagine him with that quiet kind of, if he's like, you're a sinner and I'm going to take that sin out of you. In that Tom Noonan way, tell me you would have been fucking terrified.
Tom Noonan can do no wrong. So, bring it on for sure. But, we didn't get that. We got this guy. Yeah. Bless his heart. I'm sure he was like, holy shit, I got the call back for the big movie too. Like, they're going to pay me full rate. They're going to fly me in first class. Awesome. I'm happy for that guy. Like, I totally am. But boy, oh boy, was that some, woo.
Jazz hands.
Woo. I mean, Damon, this movie was one testicle.
Yeah, it was a jazz hands. Let's talk about MVP, our next category, MVP. I kind of skipped around here. I went to one testicle first.
I'm glad you did, though. I'm glad you skipped in to MVP and put it this way, because I did want to circle back to Bobby Cannavale.
Yeah, so our MVP award for the most valuable player, our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award. Who is your MVP winner? Go right ahead.
Yes, it was indeed Bobby Cannavale, because for all this parody we're talking about, he seemed to strike the balance, weirdly. That's why I legitimately almost put him as best performance, because I was like, we're going to talk about Mia Goth. Like, I already knew that was coming. So I was like, maybe I should pick him as best performance, because whatever he was doing, he seemed to be locked into whatever the thematic roller coaster that this movie was. He was part funny, part serious, part intense. Like, he kind of got it. like, and I don't want to, I'm not knocking Michelle Moynihan. You and I both love Michelle Moynihan. She was in the first season of True Detective, which of course you and I both love. But like, she seemed out of balance, and like, I wasn't buying what she was selling, but I was buying what Bobby was selling, weirdly enough. And then he has that weird, very weird moment at the end of the movie, and I couldn't stop doing it when we were walking out of the theater, where he just goes, "I've been in this town 30 years, and I never seen this sign up close." Like, I was like, that's such a like cliche line, but like, he knew how to play it. So I was like, I'm gonna give it this time around to Bobby Cannavale, because he got whatever wavelengths and whatever quality of coke people were snorting. Cannavale got it.
Yeah, he was really good. And I will say, I thought Michelle Monaghan was fine. I love her. I'm a big fan of her. I think they just tried to make her more of the hard-boiled detective, and it just didn't work in a film like this. Like, she was the more serious, drilled down detective, and there were so many goofy parts of this movie. It's almost like you needed the goofy detective from a giallo film, where they're kind of not like all the way there. They're a little aloof, and they're not very good at their job. I think we need a bit more of that, because she was just very serious. Again, I'm not saying her performance was bad. She's great. I love her. But it's like she was like the hard-boiled detective, and he was kind of like the sidekick. The sidekick worked better in this film, is all, I think I would say.
Yeah.
So my MVP, I'm going to go a little off the reservation with this one a little bit. I'm not going to go with anyone in this particular movie, but I am ultimately, and you're going to actually be impressed by my MVP when I say this. My MVP, Patrick, is A24, the studio.
Okay.
This is a studio that I've had a love-hate relationship with over the years. Back in the day, this is going back about 3 years ago, I always equated A24 to the artsy-fartsy movies that just tried way too hard to tell me a story that had nothing to do with the story in the film. This is the esoteric dissection of blah, 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 and blah, blah. And I just butted my head against the table and wanted to smack myself in the head with a tack hammer. But over the last few years, A24 has turned me around. I am now officially an A24 fan. Now, I'm not saying they put out everything I love, because no studio is going to put out everything you love. Blumhouse is a great horror studio. They've had some duds, just like, just like I said, directors I love have had duds. But A24 over the last few years, they've really nailed it with a lot of movies I absolutely love. And the reason why I give them the MVP here is because, remember, Ty West is a genre director, and at this point, his biggest movie is kind of House of the Devil. I guess that's kind of like the buzziest movie he had. Wasn't a hit. It was just a buzzy film like on the indie circuit where horror fans are like, I like that movie. He wrote a script for X, sent it to them, and they said, okay, go to New Zealand and shoot this movie on, I have to assume, not a great big budget. And while he's down there, and he's like, hey, I got an idea for a second movie, a prequel, and I can shoot it for cheaper, but we could just stay down here and do it. And they're like, you know what? Go ahead. And then they gave him the green light for this, because remember, they teased MaXXXine at the end of Pearl without knowing how people were going to react to Pearl. A24 as a studio has said, we know we got something here. We got something here. Go make your prequel and go make your sequel, and we're going to fund it all. And will everyone love MaXXXine? I don't know. Not everyone loved Pearl. Not everyone loved X. I've heard people say X wasn't good, which I totally disagree with, but that's okay. Opinions vary. But A24 said, I see something from one movie in X, and they've more or less greenlit 3 films based on an idea, because Ty West didn't start this as a trilogy. He did not write this to say, I got a prequel in me, I got a sequel in me. He basically is like, hey, I'm here. Let's make 2 movies instead of 1. A24 is like, go ahead. Here's $5 million more, whatever money it was. And then after that, so they're like, you know what? Let's finish it. Here's some more money. Go do your trilogy. Almost sight unseen. That's amazing that they'd have that much faith. And again, they're not alone. I mean, Tarantino can go into a studio and say, hey, I'm going to make a movie about a guy who farts on a snare drum and turns into a musician. They're like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Quentin, do whatever you want. Here's $10 million. Certain people have that, that cachet, but Ty West isn't that dude. You just talked about it. Like, this is really his breakout directorial, film, these films. So A24, bravo for taking a shot on these guys, just like they recognized something in our boys, the Philippou brothers, would talk to me. Now, they didn't fun talk to me. They didn't pay for it, but they saw something and said, we want that movie. Guess what? That was our favorite horror movie of the past year. Now they gave the money. They're making another horror movie right now. They're doing a sequel to Talk to Me. They recognize that talent. And so A24, we've had some battles in the past. We had a rocky start to our relationship, but we are totally in love now.
I'm glad you two have made up. I think that's important because what I think A24 does is that they allow the filmmakers to tell their stories. I don't want to get too far off into this digression, but Warner Brothers has a real problem not doing that. Warner Brothers, for too long, was trying to chase Marvel. I'm not going to get into the history of Marvel versus DC, but they fucked up when they forgot who they were. They were the studio that filmmakers went to make their movies. That was the whole fucking appeal of WB. And when they got into the comic book wars, they lost that sense for some reason. And they said, no, we need to chase what other people are. And the great Margot Robbie kind of came out and kind of not shit on Warner Brothers, but she kind of sideswiped them and said hey, studios should back their artists. That's how the good movies get made. That is A24. They back their artists. X was made for, Damon, hold your horses, $1 million. That means Pearl was made for probably the same or less. But they basically got 2 movies for the price of 1. But they didn't give Ty West any shit. They said, what you got? That? Okay. All right, great. Go do it. Go do your thing. Here's the money. Go do it. Because they believe in their artists. And I think they knock it out of the park more than they don't. Even maybe on some of the movies that you didn't love from back in the day. It's all good. People have their own tastes. But A24 backs their artists. And for that, I will always back them. That might change down the road. Before you know it, maybe one day, Paramount is on the brink of dissolving. It may not be Paramount very soon. And A24 may rise as the next new studio. RKO used to be a huge studio, as big as Warner Brothers, as big as Disney, all that shit. And now there's no such thing as RKO. One of these big studios might fall off, and A24 might become the next big, great studio. They're winning all the fucking Oscars. It's possible that it's coming. But what they're doing right now is they're saying, we let our artists do the work. Let them do the work. Let them tell the stories. Maybe you're going to resonate with it. Maybe you're not, but we're not going to get in the way of that. And then you end up with stuff like this, which ends up becoming a great experience for the movie-going audiences.
100%. Yeah, you just don't know. But for right now, A24, you're cool in my book. Let's move on to best gore. Now, to be fair, there is a pretty decent amount of gore in this movie, which is, credit to them. Even though, weirdly, a lot of the kills are off screen, there is still a decent amount of gore in this movie. So, Patrick, what is your best gore in MaXXXine?
I'm realizing, Damon, that I just gave you the whole list of my gore, and I probably missed a few too, to be honest with you. But what I ended up choosing, which is you probably could have guessed, is MaXXXine blowing her dad's head way the fuck off. Now, in a baffling scene at the very end of the movie, she chases him up a hill after he's dispatched the 2 police officers. And he nearly killed MaXXXine in this weird ritual to teach her a lesson. She finally gets him with a sawed-off shotgun. She stands over him. She has a little delusion about the future and what the world could be, and how she's going to triumph over this. And then she snaps out of it, and she's right back there standing over him. Police helicopter buzzing around the top of her, and she goes, you know what? I'm just going to fucking blow this guy's head off. And she does. And they don't flinch. They put the camera right on him as his head explodes. And there's just a gory mass of exploded shotgun head, which I've seen plenty of shotgun head wounds. They're brutal. Not much is left. They don't shy away. It's as big and bad and nasty a gore as you're going to get in a movie.
Yeah, it's a really cool effect. And in terms of the actual effects of this movie, that's probably the best one. And it really is graphic. And boy, did they not, it is not flinching, man. They show you right there as he gets his head blown apart. That was great. But my favorite gore, and I think this was the theater I was in's favorite moment in the entire film, was the scene early on when Maxine goes down to cut through an alley to get back to her apartment, and the chain link fence is locked, and some weirdo starts stalking her down the alley. Now, sadly, the world we live in, this actually happens. Probably more than you'd want to know about. A woman simply just walking down the street and some horrible person accosting her. That absolutely does happen. And that's what almost happens to Maxine. Some guy comes up, pulls out a switchblade, and he's more or less like, "You're scared, aren't you?" And she turns around with a gun and says, "No, the fuck I'm not. You have no idea the mistake you just made." And so she makes him strip down. He has to suck on the revolver, which is a great scene. And then she makes him get down on his hands and knees, or down on face first on the pavement. And she says, "You know what happened to the last person that tried to fuck with me? I stomped her skull in." And then she takes the stiletto heel and just stomps it right down on his balls. And it is so visceral. And when you realize what she's stepping down onto, and you see his cock and balls just getting ripped apart by her stiletto, every single person in my theater was like fighting not to cheer. Like they were just like, "Oh, that was awesome." That was just so cool. And also kind of unexpected because, let's be honest, Patrick, it really played no part in the story, but it was really a cool scene.
It plays no part in the movie at all. You're just like, "Oh wow, she might have killed that guy." Like that. That's such a horrific wound. He may be dead.
It's almost like the cow slaughter in X, where you're like, why are they just walking through, like we're just driving through these cows who got hit on the road, and we're just showing a bunch of dead cows and blood and guts everywhere, and like, what really was the point of that? Kind of here where it's almost like, we got to show her being strong. Okay, I'm cool with that, but does it really need to be a stomping a guy's nuts off? Okay, cool. But it was a cool scene. It was a cool effect. So,
did she perhaps murder this guy? I don't know. It won't matter, and it won't come back. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's the 80s. They didn't have DNA evidence at that point. All right, let's slow down now. Our next category is Best 80s Nod. Now, there's a lot of 80s in this film, and I always say, anytime you do a period piece, and we've talked about this before, if you don't get it right, it can take you right out of the film. I can't remember what film we did a review not that long ago. I can't remember what it was, where it was like a period piece, and I said it just took me totally out of the film, to like, it didn't look like it was going to be in this era. And I think I mentioned The First Omen, where I said they got it right, where it's like right. It looked like the 70s in Italy and everything. They get it right in this film, man. Like, I know Ty West is not, he's not an old guy, he's not a young guy, but he was kind of a kid in the 80s. He got it right, though. They definitely got the 80s right in this movie. So what was your favorite nod to the 80s in this movie?
This is going to be so weirdly specific, Damon, so just bear with me. And I think it's apropos because you and I were talking about Beverly Hills Cop and, off podcast and our love for 80s movies. And I love 80s thrillers. I'm like kind of addicted to them. There is this weirdly specific thing that I fucking love in these movies, and it's all over this movie. And that is the lead character hops in their car. It's almost always a convertible because it saves you time. They can just hop right in the car. They hop in the car and they like peel the fuck out, and the camera pans with them as they peel out. That happens like 3 or 4 times in this movie, and it was like comfort food for me. And by the way, it's on these beautifully dressed sleazy streets of Hollywood with neon signs and shit. They really try to pull you way back into the 1980s. But I just loved that Maxine would get in her convertible Mercedes and peel the fuck out, and you'd watch her just like tear ass, like almost drive up on the sidewalk and up and over. It's just something from the 80s. It's just something that movies from the 80s did. And I know that's weirdly specific, but it was just like, that is very much the language of the movies I grew up on.
So I have 2, and I'm just going to mention them because they're just very specific moments. One that I loved is the video store.
Yeah.
When you go and her friend runs a video store and he's putting up VHS cassettes, you get to see like the cover of all the VHSs. And I used to have a video store across the street from where I grew up as a kid in Ohio. It wasn't like a Blockbuster. It wasn't a Hollywood. Right. Do you remember Hollywood Videos? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a little later. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the other big ones. Blockbuster and Hollywood were like the 2 big chains. This was like a mom and pop video store. And so that's what it reminded me of. It was like a mom and pop video store. It was just like dark and They had a horror section, and that's what I lived for when I was a kid, was going into that horror section. I knew exactly where it was, and every time I walked in, that's exactly what I made a beeline for. It was the horror section. And that video store definitely like spoke to me. I was like, oh my God, this feels like the 80s all over again. The other one, which is a funny one, because I didn't do this and I've never done this, but it did feel very 80s, was, oh boy, is there a lot of cocaine in this movie. There's actually a great scene, which everyone in my theater laughed at when I saw it tonight, was when she's getting ready to film her adult scene at the beginning of the movie. She's in like a nurse's outfit. She opens a giant cookie, like a cookie jar, and it's just fucking filled to the brim with coke, and she just takes out a little dipper and snorts some coke. And there's other ones where she's snorting with $100 bill. Coke is all over this movie. That was full on like Scarface Coke. I loved it. That's a very 80s thing to me.
It was so interesting that how much coke she does in this movie and how it never comes back around. It's truly just like matter of fact. Like she almost just like gets like she takes a line, she snorts a line just to kind of get up and running for whatever she's about to do. Like it's really weird. Like she's just like, I gotta go do this scene, snort. Oh, I gotta go talk to this detective, snort. Oh, I gotta go fight my evil dad, snort. Like it's really weird how like it's just like her taking a shot of whiskey. It's the same thing, but that's very much the 80s, right? Everybody was doing coke very casually at the time.
That was the 80s. I mean, that's why I said it fit perfectly, because back then you didn't necessarily know it was going to make your heart fucking explode. You just did it because it gave you a jazz. It was like Red Bull. It was like supercharged Red Bull back then, and people just did it. And she's doing it, man. She's all over it. She's like, I need to pick me up. You know, it's just like where it's at. So yeah, I loved it. It's just like coke all over this place. That's very 80s. That was the decade of cocaine was the 80s. Yeah, we moved on to much stronger, more deadly drugs these days than cocaine. So, what you had a great category here, which is, you know, can nostalgia color your impression of this film? And we've kind of talked about that a lot already with the Giallo and the De Palma influences here. I've made no mistake. I've made no bones about it in this podcast. I grew up in the 80s. I love 80s. Stranger Things is one of my favorite shows, beyond the fact that it's a fun show, but because it's an 80s show and they get it so right, it's just like, it speaks to me. And I fully admit, when you get it right and it's an 80s film, it does draw me in a little bit more. So is any of that of influencing us here with this film?
For me, it's a no. Because I think the 80s is done really well in this film. And that can get somebody to be like, oh my God, the aesthetic was so great. The vibes were so 80s. Like, that's not enough for me. I watch too many movies. Like, here's a movie we disagree on. You love Summer of '84, right? And that's a very 80s movie. It's almost to a fault an 80s movie. I don't dig it. House of the Devil, I didn't dig it. It had the nostalgia. It had the perfect, like, impressions. Like, it did them really well. All these movies that I'm naming actually did it really well. Quentin Tarantino can do it really well. And I actually like his movies more and more. The farther into his career he's getting, I enjoy his movies more and more. And they're like, I mean, he's another one of these exacting directors. He gets the period piece stuff right. But I'm just curious, and I haven't gotten a wide swath of how people feel about MaXXXine yet. But I'm curious if a lot of people just go, man, it was so fucking 80s, I loved it. And I go, that's not enough. And, you know, you and I have poked a lot of holes in the story for this podcast, because I think at the end of the day, for this podcast, and I'll let you speak for yourself, but I think for this podcast, the nostalgia is never going to be enough. You got to give me the full plate before I go and say, this is a great movie. I always want people to go see the movie, regardless of what I think about it. But if I'm going to tell you it's a great movie, nostalgia is not enough.
So I love the nostalgia in this movie. I love the 80s of it. They get it right. They have a great soundtrack. There was actually a Judas Priest track in this movie, Prisoner of Your Eyes, which I was not familiar with. I did not. It was like a B-side on like early Scream. It was a Scream for Vengeance or whatever it's called. It was a popular 80s album from Judas Priest, but I was not familiar with it. And this isn't even like a main track. It was a track released in like the special edition, the unreleased track. And I listened, I was like, man, this sounds good. Like, this is a great track. Since the movie was over, I went and listened to it. That's fucking awesome. Great soundtrack, great aesthetic feel of the 80s, all that was great. I loved it. So that part, yeah, but did it color me one way or the other? No, and I actually would say the nostalgia part that got me was what I talked about earlier, was the nostalgia for X and Pearl got me so hyped up for this when I went in with unrealistic expectations. And again, first time around, I came out and I was like, yeah, I'm kind of disappointed. Second time around, I was like, you know what? It was all right. Like, it was fun. You know, it was a fun, goofy movie, and I get what they were trying to do. It was very 80s, very De Palma. I don't need it to be more than that, so it's fine. Like, I don't need it to be a fucking heightened movie. I don't need it to be Silence of the Lambs. It's just a fun, goofy 80s homage. And like I said, seeing it a second time and not going in thinking, "Oh my God, this is the final chapter. This is Mia Goth's opus. Holy shit!" I just went in and said, "Yeah, it was a fun movie." And so, yeah, the nostalgia didn't do it for me. I think the expectations are what did it for me.
Yeah, that'll do it. That might be the big killer.
Yeah. So now our next category is more in this universe, and that basically means, can we revisit these characters? Because I know at one point Mia Goth and Ty West had said they're already working on a fourth film. They had an idea for a fourth film already, but now as the films come out, Ty West is kind of like, well, I don't know. I want to move on and do some other things. Mia Goth obviously has other career moves she's making, maybe Marvel, maybe something else. We don't know. Is there another way back into the MaXXXine world, Patrick?
I think it really depends on Mia Goth, to be honest with you, because I don't want to see another. Unlike a Quiet Place, where we're like, hey, we need to see totally new things and not keep revisiting the family. This is the other way around. It's like, if I'm not going to see MaXXXine, I don't care. I won't. I'm not going to tune in. It's not. It's not interesting to see the breakout world. You'd really have to come up with a cool story and bring in really great actors and really excite me to go. Yeah, let's do this now in the '90s. Like it's not. It's not. And that's not enough. But Mia Goth, if she has something that she's super passionate about to do with Ty, or even if, I don't know, I would probably prefer if it would be her and Ty directing, or if it's even Mia Goth directing and it's MaXXXine. Maybe I would check that out. But otherwise, I don't need to keep revisiting this world. Like, I feel like I've gotten everything I need to get out of it.
The only way I want back in is if they decide to do a sequel to Pearl.
Right.
Because the Pearl we meet in 1919 or 1920, whatever year that takes place in, is a very young, she's supposed to be like 17, 18 years old, already married. And then when her husband returns that's where the movie ends, is her husband coming back from the war. And he's like, Pearl? And then, holy shit. Obviously, we have to imagine that Pearl and her husband did not just stop there and then we pick up in 1979 when they kill all the porn stars. They didn't just become normal, casual home, people and just hanging out and having sex and just being like farmers. You have to imagine they killed somebody else in that fucking 60-year span. So that would be a sequel I could see you could kind of revisit years later, 10 years later. Now her husband's been drawn into her web of killing people and getting off by it, because when we meet him, he's just coming home from war. He's just coming back to find his wife and a fucking farm full of slaughtered people. Maybe that is a way back in if you want to do that, Pearl in 1940s or something. Maybe she makes another attempt at becoming famous, or somebody tries to buy their farm or some shit. I don't know. Then maybe, but I otherwise, no. I don't really need to continue this, because then it just gets hokey and somebody else is coming after MaXXXine. Why? We already did the flashback to X. The dad thing, whatever. What's next? They're going to have Jenna Ortega's parents come hunting for her because she didn't reveal that I don't really see the point in that. So no, unless you do a Pearl sequel, which I guess you can find a way back into, I don't want to see it otherwise.
Yeah, I'm with you right there.
Patrick, our next category, as we always say in this one, which is, can we survive this horror film? We are children of the 80s. Now, I'll be honest, haven't done a lot of, cookie jar full of cocaine to fit in the 80s. But can we survive this horror film?
I would assume that I'm definitely in the MaXXXine circle in all of this. I mean, I guess there is a part of me that could end up being somebody from the studio, like the production assistant or whatever that's working for Elizabeth Debicki's character. There's a part of me that could be in there, and if I was on the film side of things, I think I am surviving because that's the farthest away from her world as possible in this movie, and everyone in that world tends to end up they ended up pretty safe. Nobody got messed up there. So, but I think in reality, I'm probably closer to being somewhere in Maxine's circle, and you're in the danger zone if you are in her circle. But Damon, I'm not a gorgeous temptress. I'm not some sort of, I don't think I would have been ever tapped to be an adult film star. I don't think that's my lane. So at the end of the day, I'd probably be zoned right into Leon's character, which is the guy at the video store, which is, I bet, where you were probably putting yourself too, right?
Yeah, it's funny because one thing I do love about this film, which I so appreciate that Ty West didn't do this, is there is no male savior in here. There is
No,
no bouncer character. There's no let me walk you to
that's
your car character.
not her story.
Maxine is the one who's walking people to their car. When Halsey leaves work in this movie, and she's like, thanks for waiting for me, because Maxine is the badass. Like, she's the one who walks people to their car to make sure they get out safely, not some random dude who's like, oh, I'm the bouncer, let me walk. None of that. And I appreciate that Ty West doesn't inject that because we got a lot of that in the 80s where it's like the male savior bullshit. And we still get it today, let's be honest. So yeah, I think I would probably be Leon, which means I'm working in the video store, which means I'm fucked. So, because I'm close to her, I'm a friend, but I'm still a threat because they need to get rid of people around Maxine to draw her in. So yeah, I'm probably going to be Leon, and I'm probably going to get my neck slashed and fucking stabbed and killed in the video store because I would be working late at night with horror movies playing in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the knife would come for me. So no, I'm probably not making out alive because that's the most likely character I would play in this movie.
But we do get the cool like pentagram eye scar that he gets. That I would like that. I'd be like, hey, can you just scar me up? I can.
Yeah.
I'll keep my mouth shut, but I want the cool scar.
Also, the one question I have about that, like they show him like he cuts the back of Leon's neck is how he gets his attention there. Are we assuming that the killer is her dad? Because her dad's kind of an old, like kind of little guy. Like Leon is not a small dude. I mean, I know the cut in the back's pretty brutal, but like I don't know. I'm just saying, like, he had a cast on. Couldn't you go fucking like Cowboy Bob Orton in the 80s and WWE wrestling and just like smack him with the fucking cast or something? I'm just saying that the guy's like kind of a little older dude. I'm just saying, Leon, like, you could have gone out like not like a bitch. Like, you kind of went out like a little bit, Just saying.
Listen, that's up to Leon to tell you how that worked out. But yeah, that guy didn't feel very threatening to me for some reason.
Maybe it was his like one of his followers, then okay, but because he had some beefy followers. But
that doesn't appear to be what they were implying.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Like, could they have like cut his Achilles? Then I see where you fall down, and I'm just saying.
It was a little weird.
Patrick, we are now, what we have to, at least for now, imagine is the end of the X trilogy. So let's rank them 1 to 3 or 3 to 1. Pearl, X, and Maxine. I feel like I know your ranking, but go ahead and rank
I think this is a pretty slam dunk one for me. So Maxine comes in at third because I do have the most problems with it out of all of them. And then at number 2, I would put X, actually. I like X very much, but to me, it's a very traditional slasher. It does what it does, and it's great. But I have revisited Pearl time and time again. When it's on, I stop, I watch whatever portion of it's on, and I can't wait for that scene near the end where she beheads her, was it her cousin or something? I can't remember. Yeah,
I believe it.
That scene is the fucking coolest scene Ty West has ever shot. And so I wait for it because I'm like, that scene is so amazing. I can't wait to watch it. And because that's kind of sicko I am. So I put Pearl at number 1.
I'll go Maxine at 3. And again, I know, we've talked a lot about issues we've had with the story and everything. Trust me, there's far, far more movies that I dislike more than this one. Let me tell you that. Like, I didn't hate this movie. Again, leaving it the second time viewing it, I was just like, yeah, it's all right. It's fine. Like, it's nothing I'm going to bang the drum about or say it's one of the best movies of the year, but it's all right. It's fine. Again, I think my expectations were just too high, and that's my fault. That's not anyone else's fault. That's my fault. But MaXXXine would be third. Pearl is second for me, and X is number one. I love Pearl. I've grown around to come around to really liking Pearl, but I just, for what X was, while it was very simple, I didn't see it coming. I didn't know what to expect. I was going in having seen a couple of Ty West movies, going, "Oh God, what's this going to be about?" And it was my expectations. I went in with no expectations with that, and it blew me away. It was like, wow, this is a really creative new version of a slasher. It didn't break any new ground necessarily, but they gave me what I wanted out of a good slasher film, which I hadn't really seen a lot of at that point in a while. Yeah. So that's why it's number one for me. But Pearl, close second. Just, it's weird because they're all part of a trilogy, but to Ty West's credit, and he said this, he wanted all three films to feel different from each other, and they really do. Because I don't think, even though MaXXXine is a little more closely related to X, it's still not the same movie. It's not the same movie. So, X is a slasher, Pearl is a character study, and MaXXXine, in my opinion, is De Palma's Giallo. You say Giallo, but, we're basically, Spider-Man staring at each other saying, which one is it? We're basically saying the same thing. So, yeah, but they are all three different, to his credit. That's what he wanted.
Yeah. No, they are. They all stand on their own. They're all their own movie. I would argue you don't need one to understand the other. You can enjoy them all on their own. And, I want to hear from people and what they think about MaXXXine, because I think it's actually going to have a mixed crowd. I don't think it's going to be all love or all hate. I think it's going to be a lot of people going, I loved it, and other people going, yeah, it didn't work for me, and other people going, it's all right. And that's fine. That's movie making at its best.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny. We are a horror movie podcast. We're talking about a horror movie. At no point really have we talked much about this film being scary. And I think that's kind of on purpose, because our last category is always is it scary? Patrick, I think you can kind of tell by our tone. While I ultimately came around on this movie and said it wasn't bad, it was all right. It's not great, certainly not my favorite in the series. At no point have we really talked about the scares, because this movie isn't scary.
No, it's not scary. And I think even De Palma movies, which, I don't care for them, I think they do have a better sense of dread than even this movie does. And I think it has a lot to do with the tonal imbalance that I was talking about earlier. This movie kept me going, huh? What? And when you're doing that, you're not like afraid or afraid or tense or whatever, or thrilled. This really felt more like a thriller, or like, at least like it was designed to be more of a thriller. And I wasn't even thrilled. I didn't feel like MaXXXine was in danger in this movie at all. I never felt like, wow, her time is up. Oh shit, like somebody got her. Didn't feel that way. You said it earlier. She never feels like she's in danger in this movie, and for that, it is not scary.
Yeah, it's not a scary movie. It's weird because there's gore, there's kills, there's some pretty gnarly effects. I mean, we didn't even talk about the Lily Collins. Like, they didn't show her dying, but her getting chopped up and you see her head at the bottom of the stairs is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not really scary. And the payoff, as I said, I think it would have worked better if they would have at least shown us the motivation of the killer being this, God is great and Satan is evil guy. I think that would have like upped the ante a little bit. So at least we understand the purpose of what they're doing. They never did that, so there was no fear in that. And when they did at the end, the guy was so goofy, much like Kevin Bacon's character was goofy, that there was nothing really scary about him. He was just over the top and cartoonish, and it kind of took me out of it. So yeah, it's not scary. Doesn't mean it's terrible. It just means it's not scary. So again, set your expectations. I went in thinking, oh my God, this is going to be the third chapter. I can't wait. Holy shit, we're going to see MaXXXine Minx again. This is going to be amazing. And that wasn't that. And I promise you, a second viewing, not saying you're going to love it. Certainly not trying to tell you that. I'm just saying, like, if you let your preconceived notions go and you just watch it, you're like, yeah, it's fine. I know that's not like a rave review. And I know that's like, wow, you're really endorsing this movie, Damon. It's fine.
That's not going to go back on the back of the steel book.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Rewind of Living Dead. It's fine. I don't think we're making the back of the 4K cover for that one, Patrick. I don't think that review's
Probably
going to
not.
make it.
Sorry, Ty.
It's
Sorry,
fine.
Mia.
Yeah, so there you go. All right, MaXXXine is in theaters right now. Go check it out. And then next week, of course, we're going to get into Long Legs, a totally different movie, completely different movie, or at least we hope so. If that ends up being goofy, I'm going to be really disappointed.
Oh, boy.
If Nicolas Cage's character is like Kevin Bacon in that movie, I might just walk out.
Here's the teaser for next week. Will Nicolas Cage win his own award?
Yeah, will he get the one Tesla award for being Nicolas Cage? That'd be funny. That'd be funny if we review a Nicolas Cage movie and he doesn't get it in his own movie. All right, folks, that is our episode for this week. As always, we want to say thank you for everyone that tunes into the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and over on our own website, rewindofthelivingdead.com, as well as YouTube. Please subscribe to YouTube. We're really trying to build our YouTube. It's a slow and very arduous process. So please, if you have a YouTube or you have a YouTube subscription, please go over and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. We'd really appreciate it. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review? Tell us why we're so wrong about MaXXXine. Feel free. Send us emails at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. Or you can also send us messages on social media. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on X/Twitter, Facebook, and or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you guys. And you can also find us on our own individual social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.